Rabbi Yisroel Noach Vogel. Rabbi Vogel, you were zeicha as a bacher to be in 1970 in that year. And Bachlal the Abish Benjy Baruch Hashem with the Baal Zikar and Nifla. You're able to share with so many young Chassidim today who benefit so much from your Zikrinus. We've seen on the WhatsApp messages and other ways how you convene your messages in a beautiful way. You should continue doing so and you should continue inspiring the younger generation. So L'chaim, I understand that you were a Bachir Membez, and if you can please just share with us some Zechrenis from them. From Tishrei.
Tishrei. So, I was able to come to the Rebbe then. I don't have a Gashris L'chaim right now, but can you hear me or is it choppy?
We could hear you.
Okay. I was learning there in Yisroel, and I found it hard to travel to the Rebbe, monetary, and I had to put together some money. And one of the interesting things was the Hanhala in Vaad asked me to down for the Amud Rasham in Kippur. He gave me $100 for it. And $100 then is not like today, but whatever. It wasn't that much, but it helped. I borrowed from Remendel Kutafas. I borrowed from him $100, and I put together a few $100 to be able to come. And I ended up coming on. I arrived on Thursday of Chalmayit. The Kriyas is the same as this year, so I arrived on Chalmayit, Thursday Chalmayit. And one of the first things that that it hit me at that time, as far as I can remember, is the Rebbe was very, serious, yimont. Even when the Rebbe was ma'avid for the simcha, it seemed to me like the Rebbe was demanding, but the Rebbe wasn't, how should I say, happy? I don't know. That's what it seemed to me as for a week to understand where the Rebbe's feelings and so on. But this is the way it seemed to me. The Rebbe was not the simcha. It was demanding the Rebbe himself. And this is Thursday night, Friday when the Rebbe came to
Rabbi Vogel, it's a bit difficult to hear you.
Right. What could we do? I could change machines maybe. So it seemed to me like the Rebbe was like the Rebbe was not very simple. Very interesting thing that I noticed on, maybe if I speak slower, it'll help.
Yeah, try.
Okay. Friday night, when the Rebbe came in, the Rebbe's face looked completely different, as if all wrinkles smoothed out, as if all daigas were off. And the Rebbe turned around after Meir, and in those years, when the Rebbe would say there was no second tender, the Rebbe would turn around to the right side of his stender and lean on the stender, usually his right arm on the stender, and that's how, facing the Olam, that's how the Rebbe would say it. Okay. So this time, the Rebbe stood in front of the stender. Instead of leaning on the stender, he stood right in front of the stender, and he put his right hand sort of behind him on the stender, not leaning, just put his hand down. And the Rebbe began the sikha by saying, there's a halacha that, I can't remember exactly the order of the sikha, but I remember this is right in the beginning of the sikha. The Rebbe said there's a halacha that by Sheva brachas, you don't need Aponim Chadashes on Shabbos. Why? Because Mo'er Ponov Shel Adam is different on Shabbos. Person, his face shines. He looks different. And that, Pashat, looking at the Rebbe, then I saw it, how the Rebbe was completely different. It was shining, his face was so happy. Just remind you for a second, the Rebbe put his hand down on the stander before the Sikha. Zum allem ersten Good Shabbos. And the whole Elam answered Good Shabbos. And then the Rebbe started the Sikha. It's interesting also about, this is only the second year that they were dancing in the street. It started, as everybody knows, in Tashin. The Tashin Membeis, this is what I heard from my friends when I came to New York, some of them were not sure 100% if the Rebbe is going to encourage the singing and dancing in the street, or if the Rebbe is going to say sichas every night like he did in Tashin Memala. They were not sure. The Poel, the Rebbe did say a sicha every night of Sukkos. And if I'm not mistaken, even that Friday night, the Olam was still did not feel 100% sure that the Rebbe is going to speak. That was my feeling then. Again, I can't know if I'm right or wrong. I wasn't there in Tashin Memala. But the Rebbe spoke every night, was encouraged the singing. But it was not very, very long. I don't remember how long the dancing in the street took, how long the dancing lasted for in the street. But I do remember at some point dancing upstairs in the small zal. And it was a small circle. We were dancing around the bim in a small zal. And I was the only one who still had his voice, because I wasn't in New York before, on the first days of Yom Tov. And I was singing as much as I could. And at some point, it's whatever, I stopped. And when I stopped, the circle stopped. And I said, this is like, you don't have to rely on one person to dance. So somebody says to me, what do you think? You weren't here the first day, so you have koyach to sing. We already lost our voices. But if I remember correctly, that was about 1 o'clock. And that was all. There was no long dancing then. And the first time there was long dancing, I think Rebbe Kesler wants to make a comment over there. Just let me finish the sentence. There was long dancing was Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos, the Rebbe said such a sikha, which is actually the last night, so to speak, of long Simchas V'Zasheva, because Sunday night is already Shana Rabbah. So Motzei Shabbos is the Ushpiz of the Rebbe Marash. I remember, they were speaking very strongly. They were speaking about the Parsha of the Chumash, the Chitas of that day, the Zeis HaBracha. And this time, the Rebbe stood on the left side of his stender. I think that was quite unusual. So his left arm was on the stender, and with his right arm, Moshe, when it came to saying the word v'zois, was pointing with his finger downwards. I think the Rebbe's hand was all the way down, but there was pointing with his finger v'zois habracha. And very, very sturmlich about how you should continue to dance. And the Rebbe said, kommt zu gehen, the Kluginker, genug, Mäckchen gehen schlafen. Sagt nein. He continues to dance. And that was the first night, I think the music went till 6 o'clock in the morning. I remember actually, I don't know if Rabbi Greenberg, Yoske Greenberg is on the line yet, but I remember the next morning, we're talking about how the dancing went and so on. And he was saying that him, after the music finished, him and a number of Bachrim went over to 770 and they continued to dance outside. They said they're going to continue to dance until the Rebbe comes to 770. And he said when the Rebbe came into 770 and he saw the Bachrim still dancing, the Rebbe gave a very strong encouragement with his hand as they were singing outside 770. Okay, want to interrupt here a second? I thought somebody had something to say.
Rabbi Kesler, would add something?
No. Okay. I mean, I can just continue day by day, so what I remember. Actually,
Rabbi Vogel, we'll go back to you soon. Thank you very much. We have with us Rabbi Yosef Kesler, Shliach of the Rebbe in Montreal, who was a younger man then. However, he was zeicher to be at the Tishrei Tafshin Beis, and the Erev Rosh Hashanah Farbringen of that year, meaning his Chavtes Aleph Aleph, going into Tafshin Beis, the Rebbe started a new campaign, a new mitzvah about registering all adults into the Sefer Torah Klali. The year before, on Yaf Nissen, the Rebbe spoke about the idea of uniting all Yiddish Kinder, all Yaldi Yisroel in the Sefer Torah. And there was a Sederus that there should be a Sefer Torah as well for those over Bar Mitzvah. So Rabbi Kesler, if you can speak about that Tekufa and the mitzvah. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim. Do you hear me clear?
Yes.
I don't know if it started the mitzvah of the children's Sefer Torah Yirav Nissen, but the Mem Beis, Mem Aleph, we all know was Shnas Haker. A murder student with a tremendous student from the Rebbe Negei Shnas Haker. In the course of Shnas Haker, the Rebbe was very much speaking about the Sefer Torah for Yalda Yisroel. How it came about, I mean, the Rebbe took it in a completely different note and at a completely different level. But the Farbringen, I think with Erev Rosh Hashanah, he said a gentleman came over to him and asked him why Dafke, the children, was Hevel She'ein Bechait, what were the people Sheyesh Behem Chait? And the Rebbe took it and said, yeah, we should do that. And the Rebbe started Erev Rosh Hashanah ushering into Tafshin Mem Beis was the Mitzvah Sefer Torah. Bechlal, on a side note, although Mem Aleph was a tremendous year, I mean, everyone remembers how Mem Aleph, I don't know if there was a panel in the game Mem Aleph, but the Shnas Haker, the siches and the dancing, which was going on with the music every night, I mean, it's intensified every night, till it became a Seder Mesuda from that, but it took time. The first night of dancing around the entire Khan Heights, to pass through the Rebbe's house and as they invite them. But throughout the year of Shnas Haker, in the beginning of Mem Beis, the Rebbe talked also Alta Hemshech from Haker. But your Aleph Nissen, Mem Aleph. I mean, people remember then the Tavshin Lamed Beis, the Shivim Shana, what kind of a year it was, what a tremendous spiritual uplifting was the ganz Klal Yisroel, the Rebbe Shnas HaShivim. Came to Mem Aleph, your Aleph Nissen, there was a whole sikha, the first two sikhas, a whole ariches, a koros hatoi for the Rebbe that he has reached, and he's going into Gevuros, which was a tremendous thing. The Rebbe is notifying that it's a new tkufa coming up, going into Gevuros. It's Bishmeinim Shana. If I'm not mistaken, that he even expressed himself with a Shechiyonu Likimonu, on Hashem Malchus. So when Tisha Mem Beis came about, there was a tremendous excitement by the Chassidim that here we're talking about the Tisha, the Rosh Hashanah, and everything of Mem Beis, which is the Rebbe reaching the Shmeinim Shana. But the whole Tishrei was consumed with the Rebbe spoke a lot about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, but it was consumed with the ganze mitzvah of Sefer Torah. The Rebbe was very serious about it. The Rebbe Mamish gave the impression as a pikuach nefesh Mamish for every Jew to write a Sefer Torah. But interesting enough, on Rosh Hashanah, the Farbringen, the Rebbe spoke about the Kudah that should start from Torah. Because we're talking about Ksiva Sefer Torah, It should start from Torah. It should start with Talmidei Hatmimim, and Rebbe also mentioned the Srifke, and therefore the Rebbe said to the Talmidei Hatmimim, this is how we should start the Ksivas Sefer Torah. The Rebbe said those who were also the Amot Mimim should also be included. They should be able to have the schos to write, to buy on Eis in the Sefer Torah. Or Megia. Remember, the Rebbe was Madgish, you could either write or Megia. That's how it started. Then the Rebbe continued, and he said that those who were once Tmimim could also do it, and they could be Yotze and the Sheyim of Neim of Neseyim. They should write. So initially, that's how it started. The Rebbe asked the Anvala to immediately make a call for action, a call a meeting. I don't remember clearly, but I remember there was a Sifa. Could be Rabbi Duchman remembers more. There was a big Asifa by the Shag in the office upstairs in his house. All the Zikna Chassidim were there. The Mendel Futterwas, I remember, was there. Rabbi Yankel Hech, Berke Chaim, the Shag himself, Rav Mentlich, Rabbi Raskin. And Rabbi Raskin asked me to come along. There was a very geschmacke meeting, how to go through the whole thing of the Sefer Torah, to reach out to all yeshivas. But before that, there was a chance to Rebbe broaden the entire mitzvah to ganz Klal Yisroel. There was then a sudden plötzlich gesicha, but then it wasn't usually at all. The night before Erev Yom Kippur, the Rebbe said a sicha after Meilech. The same kriyas as this year. So I think it was Tuesday night. And the Rebbe said a sicha, suddenly a sicha after Meilech. And then the Rebbe said, everyone is included in the Sefer Torah. Not only everyone is included, if you know someone, and you know that, and he should have an Eish in the Sefer Torah, everyone should have, you could be Zeicha for him, Shalei B'Fanav. Buy for him, I learn the Sefer Torah. And it got more and more intensified that the Rebbe, till it came out late in the year, Amakos of the Sefer, and that those who have written the Sefer will be saved. It was language where the Rebbe used how the world is crumbling and falling apart, and the Sefer Torah will save the world. This was the Nekuda from the ganze Inyan, from Tishrei, Membeis, then they get the Mifta Sefer Torah. I'm sure there was other things. By the Akofis, those who remember, by Akofis, by Simchas Torah, Mem Aleph, we all remember, we all heard of that the Rebbe himself danced. Unfortunately, the Rashag was not feeling well, and the Rebbe himself danced, and then there was Akofah for the children, together with the children. This is a separate pasha for itself. But it was also by Tovshim and Beis, side the night of Shmini Atzeres, side the night of Simchas Torah, before the 5th Akofah and before the 6th Akofah, there was a Sicha, and the Rebbe explained what the 5th Akofah, the 6th Akofah, Midas HaYesod, and so on. And that's. And there was the Rabbanim.
Rabbi Kesler, sorry, there's some background noise.
What?
Levi, can you please others?
I don't hear.
Levi, can you please mute the name something different? Okay, Rabbi Kesler, can you please repeat yourself about the Rebbe said a sicha during Hakafis?
Yeah, before the 5th Hakafah and before the 6th Hakafah, both Shmini Atzeres and on Simchas Torah. And by each sicha now, I don't remember clearly. I'm sure there's other people on the panel who have a much better zikaron than I have. But one of the about the Rabbonim, the first night, and then Tzivus Hashem was the second night, and also there was a special Hakafah for the Ksiva Sefer Torah. But was Sicha explaining this is basically, I don't want to take too much time. We'll continue later, Mitzvah Shem, if there will be time, but let other people participate. I would like to hear what other people have to say. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Yeah, l'chaim, l'chaim. Our next speaker is a known historian in Chabad, and especially of Der Shvi, as well as an Erech of the Sefer of Teiches V'Sichos Kodesh, which thousands of Chassidim around the world owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to. Rabbi Michoel Seligson, a mashpia in Olotero and a mashpia in the community of Crown Heights, who was zeicha to put together a kovetz shashelos hayachas, which many of us know is the Sefer Hayom Yom, which basically documents the accomplishments of every nasi and every generation. And for the Rebbe's Erech, Rabbi Seligson was zeicha to compile it, and was zeicha for the Rebbe to be magia it and to make corrections. Often it would be a few drafts back and forth between the Rebbe and Rabbi Seligson. And without further ado, I would like to ask Rabbi Seligson to please discuss the Erech on Tafshin Mem Beis in the Sefer Shashalos Hayachas. L'chaim.
I'm not muted.
You're good. We hear you.
You hear me? Okay. Basically, we're working on the Hayom Yom in Tafshin Mem Aleph, and it was towards the end of the year. Mit Arangishim zum Rebbe. It was then Rabbi Yosef Kesler was working with me, and mit Arangishim to the Rebbe that we're planning to finish it with Korev. So the Rebbe wrote a long answer. Azivis Ishnas Hakel was a Chayelu mit a ganz Arichos Poshet Idu that the Rebbe was giving. The Peilot has geschleppt over Tishrei, and at that time I was also working on Mafteches from the Rebbe Hashab's Memorim. And I wrote into the Rebbe a Pesach Dover, and the Rebbe should fill in the date, because whatever I needed to do, Benegir the Shashalos Hayachas was done. So the Rebbe writes in the date, and on the second page, side of the page, the Rebbe writes, "Habepil mamish da'ores v'agoes la'yem yem?" Question mark. Was tut sich wegen Hayom Yom? He finally sent it in Kislev time, and the Rebbe was magiyat, gor stark. I mean, we can possibly say that the Hayom Yom is one of the most authentic biographies of the Rebbe, in the sense that the Rebbe was magiyat. Arabgenommen Sachen, zugelegt Sachen, mechane Sachen. Just interesting to note how much the Rebbe had ishita over the many years. For example, in Tafshin Chav Zayin, there was a yishuv in Shichon Chabad in Lod. The Rebbe did not want it to be under his name. So Meilech, and they told me from Yisroel, try, maybe you can mention it in the Rebbe's Tildes. Lepil Mamish, we sent it in, the Rebbe crossed it out. Interessant. And when we looked at it, you made Hatmimim from Rabbi Chaim Wolf, the Rebbe was involved, you can only get every prat. But for whatever reason, the Rebbe did not want it under his name. It came Yud Aleph Kislev, Tafshin Mem Beis. The Rebbe sends out his biography, the Shashelos Hayachas, wrote a lot of Agoes, especially when he did the Sefer Kloli, the Nuschois, V'chulos, now Wilt mit Haoris. And then the Rebbe took a onion skin paper. I don't know today if the Elam knows what onion skin is. Onion skin is basically like a carbon copy that they use, like thin paper, transparent paper. And the Rebbe started to continue writing his biography. And the Rebbe wrote, they were up to Yud Aleph Kislev. The Rebbe says, Me'erer b'negei afotas hamayonis chutza. Yutas Kislev. Me'erer b'negei miftzah Chanukah. And then the Rebbe speaks about the Sefer Kloli. And the Rebbe firtuist, the Sefer Kloli, according to some opinions, it is the end of the Seikola Teira Kula, according to some days. And Meilech the Rebbe says, see what the Elam says, that the Welt sagt, as Tafshin Mem Beis is heute Shnaz Bias Mashiach. Versteht sich, the Rebbe writes such an inyan. It's the first time the Rebbe should himself write an inyan like on a case. Die geworden versteht sich Rosh Ole, ich bin eine Meredike Iserus. And but the Rebbe wanted that certain Yonim should be looked up. And we saw that somebody in Yonim, the Maramokim that the Rebbe referred to, is Chapnish Punkt, what the Rebbe was saying. So the Rebbe said, when he get the Chassam Sefer, there was a Ore in the Ore of Hatmimim, or some Biyurim, that the Chassam Sefer wrote on Tovkuf Ayin a cage. So the Rebbe, when he came back from the Rebbe says Lahashmit, and then the Rebbe writes further the next day, Sinish Konstire, Val Yederer, was gelebt, mit Kufa von der Cage, hat geschrieben dem Cage von seiner Zeit. Bei Meilech bei Chassam Sefer was Tovkuf Ayin.
Rabbi Dolek, can you translate that?
In other words, it doesn't contradict to what it says that it's Tovshin Mem Beis, although the Chassam Sefer is Tovkuf Ayin, because everyone from the daily Yisroel would refer to a cage that is closer to their time. So by Meilech, the Chassam Sefer wrote Tovkuf Ayin, but it's not Tovshin Mem Beis. So this was basically the Tovshin Mem Beis. And from Damostan, the Rebbe started to name every year, connected it to a cage. The Rebbe connected it with the Tovshim Mem Gimel, Tiyeshnas Gili Mashiach, Nachedot Tiyeshnas Divri Mashiach, Meilech HaMashiach. There's 1 year that the Rebbe skipped, but otherwise every year the Rebbe announced the Fabringen before Rosh Hashanah or Besmichos. Mit gesehen as a nayer Gili, was tut sich damals, every year the Rebbe was announcing, declaring what the year is.
Rabbi Zalek, do you know a story with the Rebbe Shlich Morocco, Rabbi Leibor Raskin, about suggesting that the Rosh Tevis and Tavshim and Beis?
Not familiar. I know that he wrote in about Tinosi also, and the Rebbe told him that the spelling, the Seder Eisa should be different. I think he wrote Tisna. So the Rebbe says that line Tinosi. But we did hear then that Rabbi Zusha Vilmovsky, all about Shalom, Machin Gitumot, that Tavshim and Beis is Tishnas Bias Mashiach. When he was here Tishrei, and then the Rebbe in Yud Aleph Kislev, that's when the Rebbe released it, and there was like a whole new opening. And we verstanden damals das Chassidim that this is the Shmeinim Shana, und es wird gebracht 18 Chassam Sefer. A Punkt wie der Geil Rischen, ich gewinne 80 Jahre, hat gesagt der Geil Achari. Also sie haben damals Chassidim gerät und gehofft, dass ich gewinne Kislev a few months before Yud Aleph Nissen. It was a regular year then. Also interesting to note that the Siyum Sefer Kloli, I think maybe Rabbi Kesler mentioned it, is started the Ksiva Sefer Kloli began on Erev Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe says before the Siyum Hashanah. The Noach given Noach in Yapela Dikazach. In Tovshim Mem Beis, they finished the Siyum Sefer they made the Siyum Sefer HaKloli. I think it was in the hotel in Manhattan. The Rebbe Damas Geret Asicha, that the Rebbe Rashab in Ayin Zayin, there was a Maimer in Saticha Likim, and with this Maimer at the Mevakel given the Malchus, the letzter from the Nitzigim from the Malchus from Shali in Rusland. So the Rebbe is geführt. I think us behind. Now you look at it, you won't even see these words. The Rebbe says, "Mizol Potter werden in dem Schuss von Sevetera Kloli, Potter werden von dem Goy und Goyishkeit." You look at it today. It says, "Zol Chenniken zum Guten Punkt wie damals." 2 days later, it was in the news that Soslov, who was a whole ideologist in Russia with many administrations, like Atashita, he's a Pashat Gepegert. And Monday, he was in the news. Und das ist gewesen ein Wort an Shabbos war Aaron Mem Beis.
Wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. Next speaker, we have with us one of the Rebbe Shluchim in Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska, Rabbi Yoske Greenberg, who was zeicha then to come to the Rebbe and actually the year before he came, and since then, Baruch Hashem, he never left. He was zeicha to see many, many beautiful episodes and to be involved with many activities throughout the years. And it's our schos to ask Rabbi Greenberg to speak some of his zichrenis from that year when he, if I'm not mistaken, he was a Bachar Elotera then, to hear from his perspective what on the ongoings of 770 and the ongoings by the Rebbe. Rabbi Greenberg, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
still the hemshich of Simchas Torah until Shabbos Bereishis. So
It's a schus for me, and thank you for all the speakers before. But I'd love to hear from Rabbi Kesler and Rabbi Seligson and Rabbi Duchman, Yashaker, for everyone. Just to share, I was a young bacher. They were mamish elter bachem and or Jungelite already. I was a young bacher. I just came from Israel the second time. I was the first time at the Rebbe Lamed Vov. So first, I want to give just a general review of Tishrei of Tishrei Mem Beis, the Yim Mem Beis, and then I'll just a few details, and we'll make it short and sweet. So Bechlal, the Yom Tov Shem Beis was a very rich year, very reich year. I mean, many issues that later became Avni Yesed Chassidus Chabad in the last 30 years or 40 years. Last 40 years started in Mem Beis. The Moshel Adugme, beside the Mitzvah Sefer Torah, of course, beside the Mitzvah Torah, but the Moshel Adugme, the Menera, the Lubavitch Menera, the Rebbe spoke about the Kanim should be like the Rambam and should not be Agulis, should be Balachsen, that started in Mem Beis. The Luchas should not be Agulis and should be by Meruba, it was in Mem Beis. There were many issues the Rebbe spoke in Mem Beis, and many Reichim Yonim. Even Shemitz B'Neach was a Meilech Gurevitch in Mem Beis. But first I want to give a general feeling what happened in Mem Beis. So because I was later in 70 for many years, so I want to explain you that Mem Beis, I mean Rabbi Kesler, Rabbi Duchman, to them it's normal. But Mem Beis was still the year that was more like the Lamets before the huge Olam started to show up and things changed in 70. So Mem Beis, I was a Bochen Alter, and I remember Tishrei, and later the entire winter. For even one example, the Rebbe used to go Shabbos home every Friday night. The Rebbe used to go home. Mem Beis was the last winter that the Rebbe went home. Maybe Mem Gimel a little bit, but then after that, after Pesach Mem Beis, the Rebbe stayed in the library, and it started to be Yom Tov in the library, and then little by little Shabbos in the library, and so on. So I remember Shabbos, the Rebbe used to, Friday night, everyone knows the Rebbe used to go down to Shul for davening, and then the right Mamzman, but the Bochim, all, hard to believe today, such a thing, that the Bochim was sitting upstairs in Zal, learning the Seder Sichos. Nobody went downstairs. And the Rebbe himself used to be in his room till after the Ma'ariv from the Bochim. Only after the Ma'ariv from the Bochim, the Rebbe used to go home. And we used to, Rapinia didn't allow us to go to 770 because we had our own Seder in Zalma Alter. But we used to run to eat something and run right away to 770 to wait for the Rebbe to come. And when the Rebbe is to come out, so we saw the Rebbe going on Eastern Parkway. And then as young Bochim, we would run back on President Street from the other side, back on Kingston, and run on President. There was there is still today the mailbox there. We were hide behind the mailbox just to see the Rebbe. And it was amazing to see how on Eastern Parkway the Rebbe used to go very, very fast. And as soon as he turned around to Brooklyn, the Rebbe had to go Gelassen, Benachas. It was a pleasure to see the Rebbe, the way he walked as a Belachas, and until he went up the steps to the house. Just at the Dugme, it was freezing cold. It was every Friday night in the middle of the winter. But we ran to see the Rebbe. It was just and we had personal encounters with the Rebbe all the time because in 70 was so small. For example, that summer, the summer of Mem Beis, we were a group of Israeli Bach, and we came to Alter, and we came really to be in 770. We came to see the Rebbe. So after Beis Tammuz, the custom was the yeshiva is to go to Siberia to camp to the vacation, and we went after Beis Tammuz. I remember Rabbi Chodaka used to come out and watch the buses of the camps, and we went to. I think the Rebbe used to come out the earliest. So there was a Verbringen, Tazvav Tammuz, and we went to Verbringen by hookup. So we, the Israeli Bach, we said to each other, we didn't come to New York to hear about hookup. We could have done it in Israel. So we decided we all jumped in a truck. There was an electrician who came from Crown Heights to fix something in camp. We jumped in a truck and we went back to New York, and we came to Ephraim Pekarski. We said, we want to be counselors in Alter. They need counselors. We are not going to away from the Rebbe. And he agreed, and we stayed in New York for those 3 months of the summer. And I remember I was all night in 770. The Rebbe used to go, everyone remembers the guys who were there remember, the Rebbe used to go home at 12 o'clock at night, every night in the summer. Ma'ariv used to be 9:45, I think 9:45 was Ma'ariv, And then the Rebbe used to be in his room, 12 o'clock. You have to understand, the Tovshim Beit, 12 o'clock at night, there were maybe 10 bochim in the whole building, maybe 10 bochim. I used to sit there, mamish by the door, you know, the Semsempi, the table across from the Rebbe's door, and the Rebbe would come out, and I would just look at the Sikhe, a bit mine and Sikhe, waiting for the Rebbe to come out. The Rebbe would come out, I would close the Sikhe and jump to see the Rebbe. And I remember there were several times the Rebbe was looking at me like, that's what you do in honor of me, you close the book. But it was such a personal, there was nobody around. It was like you felt that individual encounter with the Rebbe would look on you through and through every time. I remember, for example, something that happened that summer that I never saw in the Yumanim. Everyone knows about one of the Chassidic Binke Altas, later, whatever. But so I remember there was a one night in the summer, and I see he's waiting for the Rebbe. So I knew something will happen here. The Rebbe came out, and mamish there were like maybe one other person beside me and Binke and the Rebbe. So I stand behind Binke, I was hiding behind him, and he stops the Rebbe, and he tells the Rebbe that Shmuel Betzal Alter is in Australia, is very, very sick, and the doctor said they have nothing, they can't help him. They don't know anything what to do. I still remember how the Rebbe did with his shoulder, like this, with the Achseln. I would say, Bazei, ich sage nicht, was zu tun, soll vorne heim lernen Torah. That was the Rebbe's words. And the Rebbe walked away, and he was standing there thinking, like, puzzled what that means. The Poel, he recovered, and he lived to Toshim Hei. So I'm just saying it was something, I think that I mamish stood next to the Rebbe, had the Rebbe said it with the hand, but I just saying that was the Elam was small, and the Fabringas, especially there were several Putznikas Fabringas, the Yemat Yaniyot, and there was such a small Elam, mamish you felt that, and Klal, just to talk about, for example, Sukkos. I remember the Sichas of Sukkos, Chalamed Sukkos. The Rebbe, one of the Sichas, if you remember, the Rebbe said that the Pshat is not the Rebbe's demanding Mizal Vainu for ganze Nacht, not schlafen by Tag. It will be dancing all night, then to sleep by day. But he means not to sleep by night and not to sleep by day. And I remember, mamish, how by 4 a.m, we used to get into the shul, the shul on the, what was the name of the shul? The shul on Montgomery, the Montgomery shul, the shtibel there in Montgomery. We used to go into the shtibel there. What?
You said Chaver Shas?
Yeah, the corner, the mikveh shul. I forgot what the mikveh was. And we used to sit in the shul, and we slept there on the tables like that for an hour and a half, from 4 to 5:30. And then 6 o'clock, we ran already. We went to mikveh, we ran already to some cemetery to wait for the line for the lulav. We mamish didn't sleep the whole sukkah, kipshutek. I remember the Sikha, every night, the Rebbe said the Sikha, the Rebbe, especially when there was no mic, the Rebbe used to kind of a little bit scream that everyone should hear. And the Noach, the Rebbe left, I still remember some of the expressions of the Rebbe from those Sikhas, and the Rebbe left, the Rebbe used to stand there for an hour and a half, Balabatim and Ochem and Bochem. The Chaz of the Rebbe was groups and groups, Chaz of the Rebbe Sikha. It was such a chayv that I don't even remember it later in such a way. So Tovshim Beit was a very rich year. Now, just for a few more details. First of all, I also remember that summer how Yisroel Glitterstein came with his children that summer from Eilat, and a few weeks later, Yossi came with his children from Eilat. And it was very unique how by Ma'ariv, the kids would stand by the Rebbe's table. They were mamish little kids. His oldest kid was there. And after Ma'ariv, by Kaddish, the Rebbe was saying with them, Omenesh Merabo, like a father with children. And the Rebbe used to go, Yisroel would wait with the kids till midnight. The Rebbe used to go, I remember one time, the Bochim was singing some song, and the Rebbe gave me the hand, and then the Rebbe saw the kids. So the Rebbe took out one foot from the car, and he made it with his hand to the little kids that were up there at midnight. And then Yossi came with his kids, and the Rebbe did for Yossi's children the same thing. He made Mishmerabah with the kids and everything. It was just you saw the chibur from the Rebbe to the children of Shluchim in such an unusual way. But then I just want to point out one thing about the mitzvah of Torah that everyone spoke about. I remember the big Sturm of Mitzvah started Shabbos Lech Lecha. If you remember, Shabbos Lech Lecha, the Rebbe was saying, the Rebbe was screaming. He said, when I got the Rishime, I got the list, how many names what verschrieben to the Sefer Torah is me geworden lichtig in the Egen the Loschen Sage daher. It became light in my eyes, the Loschen Sage daher, which means it became black in my eyes. That's all the number. The Rebbe started saying as the Ringe von Sefer Torah is not a simple thing. It's possible the Welt schockelt und kriselt, and it's a pikuach nefesh for every Jew. So after speaking the whole Tishrei, that's the numbers everyone provides. And I remember that Shabbos Lech Lecha changed the game. And I remember that Motzi Shabbos, there was a bus, the entire yeshiva, we went to Monsey, it was cold. And we went to Monsey from door to door. And I don't remember anyone, it was not Lubavitchers at all. I don't remember anybody who said no to this. Everyone was walking with us mamish with a smile, and people did it with chibur. And the Sturm from Mitzvah Torah, I remember once I was on Mishtoim, it has to be Erev Shabbos Lech Lecha or Erev Shabbos Noach. I was in Manhattan, and the Breslau the Chazak came over to me, and he said to me, he heard the Rebbe's the Mifta, we're going to write a Sefer Torah. That's what he said to me, for Breslau. So I went to Maskirut, I came back from Mishtoim, and Label and Miriam were there. I told them that what happened, and they both wanted to know all the details, what exactly he said. I said, I don't know who that Breslau there is, and if you can rely on him, but that's what he told me, that they're going to write a Sefer Torah. But the Rebbe kept saying constantly that the Sefer should be in every Nusach, it doesn't have to be Chabad, it should be in all the Sroid, whatever it is. So I remember that Sturm. Another important Sturm that happened that year, that had something just personal. Erev Rosh Hashanah, I mamish came of Slichas. Erev Rosh Hashanah, I came to, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Slichas was 7 in the morning. And then after Slichas, there was a break. There was a Seder Chassidus, there was a break. Now I remember I went to 1414. My brother Yisroel had his apartment there, his room there. I was staying with him, and I went to take my film. I didn't know yet that say this dorm is 770. So I go before davening. I go back to 770, and I go mamish there. And this time I was a young bacher from Lud. And the first day from Rebbe, I'm thinking Tanya, it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. I think Tanya, I'm walking the street, and then I'm standing at the corner of Mr. Parkway in Kingston, and I feel somebody's looking at me. So I turn around and I see the Rebbe is like staring at me. That's how I'm looking, like through and through. And I jumped up, and then the Rebbe kind of took his eyes away. But he continued, even when I came back, he continued looking at me. You felt that personal relationship with the Rebbe in such an unusual way throughout the year. One more thing was what Rabbi Seligson just mentioned about the Inif Mashiach. The Yisroel that was about Mashiach in that year was unusual. It was mamish, I think, the Sturm of Mashiach. For example, what Rabbi Seligson, I remember Rabbi Seligson got the answer. I remember, I think it was a Yudalef in Benjy Pearson. And I remember in Olateira, we got this phone call that a zettel came out of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe wrote, Tov Shemei Beis Tishnas Bias Mashiach. We all ran to 770. We all ran. It was the middle of the day. We all ran to 770. It was like, what? The Rebbe wrote Tishnas Bias Mashiach. The Olam was going on redder. You can imagine the sales it was. We were mamish going nuts. And again, it was kids, it was cold. We ran from Olateira all the way to 770 to find out what's going on. What did the Rebbe say? And then later, those remember Purim and Beis. Purim and Beis was another step in that Sturm from Mashiach. When the Rebbe said, "Van Verbringen," that mamish close to the end of the Verbringen, the Rebbe said, "As Mashiach can is Galaver, as 770 Eastern Parkway and Shushan Purim Tovshim and Beis." The Elam was going nuts, and the Rebbe finished. The Elam started the Nigen, the famous Nigen. The first was the Nigen. We want Mashiach now. If I had him. That Nigen, and then the Elam changed it to we Mashiach now, and the Rebbe told him with the hand that the Elam stood up. It was mamish dented. It's mamish unbelievable. Then the Rebbe said that someone should make a kula, and someone should be Adel Yoda, should volunteer to be Adel Yoda. And the Sturm from Mashiach that started that Purim, I remember the whole night after the Verbringen, there was one of the Mechoel to Chabad from Satmar, Boruch Hertz. He ran to Chaim Boruch right away to buy the tape, and he had a little tape recorder, and he was playing the tape the whole night in 770 upstairs by Verbringen. Those words that the Rebbe said, Vasher is gone, 770. It was such a mishugan seirus that it's hard to describe it.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Greenberg. We'd like to go back to you after the next two speakers. Please don't leave.
I'll finish with one word.
Okay.
There is a very big word, the Rebbe says, and it's important everyone to know. Because there is a whole thing about going on. You get Mashiach, that adapted with the Rambam, that Yam Melch David. There is a movement among some of the maskilim in Chabad, or Balinigli in Chabad, the Rebbe says that the Dafka lit in Rambam, mit Yam Melech, und wie stimmt das, mit Itzter, die ganze Weise. Tofshim in Beid, Babar Shabbat Verbringen, was a whole sicher. The Rebbe asked the question, wie can man sagen, as Tishrei B'Av, Nebel Mashiach Shel Yisroel? And therefore, the Geula could have happened on Tishrei B'Av. So the Rebbe asked the question, what says Nebel Mashiach Shel Yisroel? He was a baby. He was just born. How could he be Mashiach? And the Rebbe clearly answered, as Pung in Bria Soel, when the Kaim and Hevel were born, they were born like 20 years old, and Chava, the mother, told him to cut the cord. So the same thing the Rebbe said, the Mashiach, the Mashiach could be a baby, was just born, and he's a Odom Sholem, which is Manig Yisroel, taking off from Golos. So the ganze Linie, as the Rebbe said, as Muzdai from Rambam, se hitzach nicht on, aber Ferish is Sichen from Rebbe Tavshim and Beis, when the old Shul Mashiach started, as Mashiach could be a 1-minute baby, because the ganze Linie is Beifen Shul Zochus, the Meilech Gurevitch. So the ganze Linie does not mugble. The Rambam wrote, as Mashiach had come בדרך הטבע, כעוני ואיכם החמי, בדרך הטבע, does the halacha as the minimum. Aber wie wird es sein, לפעל ממש, the Rebbe schon gepasst, das ist Meilech Gurevitch, the Rebbe said it also, but it's sicher von Chesiv und Tavshin und Aleph, as Emceed Reino, Mont und Firtuis, as the Besamir is aufgekommen in 770, which is definitely the Meilech Gurevitch, the ganze Rinien, as the Besamir is kommt in 770, and von dort flippen in Eretz Yisrael. It's all the ganze Mashiach, the Rebbe gepasken, is sicher Meilech Gurevitch, so all the Shailas and Ram, Chal came not nicht. Anyway, I continue.
Shekeach, Rabbi Greenberg, l'chaim.
Pleasure, l'chaim.
In the Sikha of Chamisha Osber of Tavshin Memches, the Rebbe speaks about the significance of a kviyas. Every single year is structured in a certain way, and the Rebbe quotes the Baal Shem Tov that from every single thing you can learn from Ayra and Beis Hashem, how much more so when it comes to kviyas, there's every single day and every week there's Hayra and how to serve the Eibusher better and how to make the Eibusher more part of our lives during this that year's kviyas. So as mentioned before, the kviyas for Tavshin Mem Beis is the same as this year, Tavshin Pei Beis. Also happens to be Bahi Barba'im Shana, as mentioned earlier. So with that said, we'll move on to the chelik of the Rebbe's Torah from Tavshin Mem Beis. We have with us here the Rebbe Shliach in Laguna Beach, California, Rabbi Meilech Gurevitch, who was Zeicha as a young bacher from Eretz Yisroel to be involved in the Rebbe's Sichos, to be involved with the Vaad of Lahak, Vaad Chavri Lahak, and he's with us today to discuss and bring us back to those times. L'chaim Rebbe Meilech.
L'chaim, Tzalman, L'chaim. So I wish I should have been here from the beginning on and to hear everybody talking. The Tkufa is given was very powerful Tkufa on my personal level. Every Verbringen, and we, had to. I was a typist basically. So, but when the Rebbe read from Boruch Hertz, when he speaks many times on Rashi, Boruch Hertz sometimes makes a mistake. So some things went through that way also, but the idea was to learn the Sikha.
Rabbi Meilech, can you first go back to the Areka of Lahak, which started just a few months earlier?
Yeah, okay. So we started Lahak actually Shabbos Pashas Gdeishim, which was right after Pesach Mem Aleph. And I was a bacher in Chavavei Teire in Mem Aleph. And for years before, I already was involved in typing. It started basically after Lamed Ches, after Shmini Atzeres Lamed Ches, when some people started writing Yomanim, and I was then a Bocher in Oloteren. So they asked me also to fix the Hebrew and to type and whatever, so I started learning how to type. Within a short time, I also started helping in Anoches Hatmimim. They had a professional typist, but when we needed to do more, I was there a lot to help. By the way, just somebody sent me what happened with Yoske. With Yoske passed away, my brother passed away 6 months before Pesach. So he sent me a few videos that they used to be in shul together. Again, this has nothing to do with my base. This has to do, I don't know when, but so he sends me a few videos. So reminded me that when I was I'm talking about when I was in Anoches Hatmimim. Anoches Hatmimim, this is before Lahak. There was a bed over there that all the bochim who were working in the Anoches, working day and night. So this one can take a break and take a little sleep for an hour in the bed, whatever. Anyway, Zushe, for those who don't know, Zushe used to come every Tishrei, used to work very, very hard to make sure Yisroel was involved, that the Ochim should learn Torah also, should not only be there, as guests, sondern sitzen and learn. And he comes to me upstairs and says, Meilech and Zushe seinen Brüder, can you arrange for me that I should be able to sleep on that bed? So I told him, yeah, I'm a young bocher, but I'll ask them. So I asked them in Boruch Hertz, he got reshus. So Zusha Brida. So now I saw it in videos. My brother and Yoske, Zusha's son, used to whatever, had discussions for who, they were davening a lot in that same shul. But since you're asking about the beginning, so the beginning was again right after Pesach, Memalef, Shabbos Gdeshim. I was a bocher, and David Feldman and Benny Wolf came to the where we ate the bochim, and he tells me, he says, Meilech, we need you now to help something. We're starting in Hebrew, and the first week in Hebrew was basically starting in order to get a bracha from the Rebbe. We need to have it all done. We did it all and finished it, and sent it to Yisroel to print and bring it back to us before Shabbos, and we got a bracha from the Rebbe. And this is how Lag started. Shabbos Pashas Gdeshim Memalef. It was a lot to build and all of that. I also, because mentioning typing, I was typing also about some of the Alter Rebbe's Kisvei Yad and Kisvei Yad of those already Alter Rebbe's Maimorim, some of the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim. But then my name is also, I'm also there in the Mafteches of the Alter Rebbe's what the Rebbe did in Memalef. So I'm there also. Anyway, but when it started Lahak, this is the point. It started Lahak, so it was basically day and night, every day. Yoske Greenberg just was talking about that Sukkos, we used to stay up a whole night. That is true. By me, it was, whenever I finished typing, I used to run dancing and then coming back to type. And, this was after L'chaim's also. So this was plenty of that. But I want to say that, Poshet, it was it was a lot of work there. And Baruch Hashem, things went through, and some people came to me complaining, whatever. So I says, this is the famous line, the Rebbe uses it in the Sikha sometimes also, it's Yisroel, it's called Eretz HaTzvi, that there's room for everyone. So I said, the nights by me is Eretz HaTzvi, and I have room for everyone, but I need to type. And I did plenty. I did also some Igros Kedesh, for the mosquitoes. Look at the Sikha. Oh, you see the picture, yeah. Anyway, this was then, but I want to say, if you go back to Membeis, we started, what's one of the interesting things in Membeis that we started is actually, this is when we started books.
Meilech, is that you as a bacher typing in this picture?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
So just to give the crowd some illustration of what he's discussing, this is Rebbe Gurevitch typing in Rebbe.
And you see, label Alta and Dalton, this is another thing that I used to do a lot of the Rebbe's Agoyes. The Rebbe used to Magia twice, right? The first Agoy, that is when they write to the Rebbe. Then the second Agoy, before it goes for print by Motel Chain, this is me sitting here and typing on a typewriter, which was, for me, was already out of my normality, because I started with the mechanical, on a typewriter, that means every line you got to take off your letters, whatever, so your hands, and then move another line. this is a disturbing thing. So I said, I'm not. So for Anoches, we started in the what's his name, and we got a machine for it. Whatever. This is all technical issues. But yeah, this was all in Membeis, basically starting Membeis. Another thing that we did is instead of sending to Yisroel to print, we found a place in Manhattan to print, and that helped us. That by Wednesday night we had to send them packages, boxes to so people will get it there on Thursday, and then it will be spread all over before Shabbos. And yeah, it started sometime in Membeis, and then in Mem Gimel we had already, we started printing. We had that part of ours, but it was basically growing. This organization, this Anoches Lahak, that started was in a way was a very powerful issue because, yeah, the Rebbe speaks in Yiddish, and I think there's a letter somewhere in the early, in the first few, where my Iris Kodesh, in one of the first Iris Kodesh, where the Rebbe writes that the Yiddish, buys it in Yiddish, v'chulu, but the Teichen is the Teichen Limudi. So one of the things that was from Yisroel, there was two things that they sent us from Yisroel in order to start Lahak. One was that there was a new generation growing, and they don't speak Yiddish as they do, but we have to be mechanech them. So this was one issue, yeah or no. The other issue was how to present to push it to all the lomdim with all rabbanim v'chulu. They should see the Rebbe, what the Rebbe read and what the Rebbe is teaching. What the Rebbe is, when it's in Yiddish, how many of them are reading it? And when it's, there's also the famous line about Yiddish, the Torah that was translated in Yiddish. I forgot the name of it. That was not so much for the big Talmidei Chachamim. But the point here is, again, to bring it to make a fotzas. The whole issue was a fotzas hamayonos, and make a fotzas hamayonos on a practical level. In a practical level, so every time we had the sikha, we used to right away send it with some bochen downstairs to 770. So, this was a ma'apecha that the sikhas started, the sikhas were already, completed before the next Shabbos. They had already to learn the sikha.
Meilech, I would like to ask you, for those of us who aren't familiar with the process of publishing the Rebbe's Torah, can you just give us a little overview of from when the Rebbe said the sikha until it was published? What went on, and how many sleepless nights did you have? And if you can go into the technical details, thanks.
If you want to, okay. So every Motzei Shabbos Rebbe used to send over there for the Chazorah, and everybody was there. Everybody used to who remember, and those who take notes, v'chulu. And I was working with David Feldman. That one for me is like a chassidische tate in a way. He was older than me, was, educating me and all of that, and bringing me to all of this. And Simon was in Yiddish, in Hatmimim, and there was a few others who were also taking notes. Those who, a lot of them had, they remember the details, and Rebbe used to talk, and they would add, this was a very common thing, always then back to Lahak, if I'm going to say, David used to stay day and night and write it. David knew that in a typical Hanacha, he has to finish it before by Tuesday in order for us to have it on Wednesday. And whatever he started, let's say Sunday, would give me Sunday ready to type whatever he finished there, like the whole process. And by Wednesday, Wednesday afternoon, I had to run to the airport. This is when there's one Verbringet, Shabbos, but there are so many times when there's more Verbrengets. Okay, take for example, we're talking before about the sichas every night, the sichas. So this was the mamish, talking about extra time, extra work. This is not just the Chofcheshvan. So many times. I mean, yeah, it's true that in those days it was not sichas so much spread like so often. In Membeis, let's say, like in Memches, Memtes, but still, it was there was a lot of Verbringens, a lot of that. It was a lot of work. I mean, I'm getting that point back. At one point, I think it was by the end of Mamalef or beginning Membeis, we brought in Yisroel Shimon to be from our Mekemes. Before that, this was also on my head a little bit. And when it's books that we didn't have in our office, I used to run downstairs to 770 to the Cheder Sheni over there, in the back over there, where the Chosn and Kala are sitting, for after the Chasana, after the Chuppah. So I used to pick up books over there. So bottom line is, when everybody is over there standing in line for Minche or for Ma'ariv, whatever, and after all, I'm running. 2 times happened to me that Binyamin Klein had to stop me because the Rebbe gate. And unfortunately, yeah, I had to, whatever.
Gurevitch, was there any deadlines for when the Sikha was written down until it had to go into the Rebbe?
By saying headlines,
Deadlines.
deadlines, I understand, but we're saying the deadlines mitzad the Rebbe, lav davke. Mitzad the Rebbe was later on, before we started, because we started with the guys, which was more in, I think, name and Vogel. But back to that time, it's basically, that itself was a revolution because most of the anarchists up to that point was almost never within a week. Okay? And here we Pasha did it in such a strong way that I'm saying is the Bochum in the right in 770, in those first years, but Pasha, they had that Tainug. The Tainug they had, that Boruch Hashem, the Rebbe had the Verbringen on Shabbos, and then on Wednesday or Thursday they get the Sikha, and they would spend, the Bochum would spend so much time just to learn the Sikha, just to get, to see it in writing. And and learn it from writing. This was a very big deal. We had constantly people came to us to thank us, and when they start sending to other shluchim, alava, we started that. Now, but you want from me the physical. You want to have a word from the Rebbe, a sikha, one of the interesting things, since you're talking about, let me just say, I when you mentioned to me that you want me to talk, so I decided I'm going to open and take a look into sikhas again, to remind me what, in those days. One of the interesting things is you can talk about Simchas Torah, about one of the interesting things is the Ato Bechartonu, what the Rebbe is asking. We say every day by davening, we say, Bono Bechartonu Kolom. So what is the Ato Bechartonu? On the other hand, we say to Rabbeinu Shalom Ato. To you, it's like face-to-face kind of. The Rebbe brings this point that is a much higher level than Bono Bechartonu Kolom. Bono Bechartonu Kolom is this is the tefillah that leads to Torah v'chulu. But Ato Bechartonu is a much higher level, and it has to do with the Yishmini Atzeres Lochem, then Simchas Torah v'chulu. It's a ganze Sira, but the point here is that the Rebbe is basically saying, hey, we are getting more and more. And this is basically, to say a proverb, I want to say L'chaim before I talk this. L'chaim.
Rabbi Gurevitch, do you recall the Rebbe walking in to show with the Sefer Lahak? His Vaad?
A few times, yeah. Also to the Sukkah.
I'm sorry, again?
Also to the Sukkah, he used to take some of those books. Sometimes he would take the same book a year later also, the same, I don't remember if it was Ben Gimel, whatever, but then they saw him, the same book again. But this is, I want to say again, the concept of Ato Bechartonu is just one dogma of this, that we have to grow. People who called me, whoever called me about this, was about Tavshin Beis Station as Bias Mashiach. Tavshin 4 years later, Tavshin Pei basis, Plois, V'chulum. And there is a basic question, if from a calculation perspective, it's a very basic question, how long, but the Rebbe takes everything, and everything that is, in this, the basic point is there, the vorabgehen in Elam Haze, tiefer and tiefer, mit the Keches von Teirem, mit the Keches von Yadorches von Chassidus, what's a man and with that, we are not only Simcha, it's an effect, and it's bringing closer with the Dir B'Tachteinim, and bringing Mashiach, with all inyanim. So Tavshim and Beis actually started with this point, Teishnas Bias Mashiach, in public, in that statement. And this is a very powerful issue. And yet, this year, the Seder Hashanah is the same. There's so much to learn from it. So I want to say, there's plenty more to talk about. Yudal of Nissen, I got to say something on a personal level because, a few months ago, my kids, in the middle of the Corona business, they suddenly surprised me. Why? Because they decided that they heard that their father is getting, another zero. Yoske, your brother Yisroel is probably on the same level with me here because we were Chavrusas there. 60, okay? And there's an interesting thing when people are asking 60. If you live 120, you're growing up to 60, and then So the Rebbe in Chav Beis, in Yidalef Nissen, read from them Indian that they are growing. Then in Yidalef Nissen, Mem Beis, we had the Tanya, all that. But why enough of the Sikhs is given the Nakuda that you are growing and growing because if you're focused on the Chassidish Inyonim, you are growing. You're not. Maybe the body is a little harder here. So it started, the Velta She'elam, you get a certain age, they stop working. By the way, this was also in Lamed Beis, where they said this point in the Sikha, by Yidalef Nissen, that some people think at a certain age, they come to 70. So, but the point is, this is a starke Sikha that we got to grow and grow, and all as man, the whole time we got to grow and grow. So this is a very big deal. I want to say, there's Geleiter, there's Bochemia, whatever. We are all having, I want to say on Shlichus and Boruch more than 30 years on Shlichus already. And one thing that is always sitting in my head whenever I have a question or some lachatz is a very simple thing. Was will the Rebbe? The moment that goes into your mind, you have, and Baruch Hashem, is mamshich mer, so this is a very big deal. That's a big deal. By the way, one of the sikhs that were in Bar Malchus this weekend here is a very interesting thing. The Rebbe said in Simchas Torah. This is a sikha from Tafshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe sagt mir so, look in the picture of the Rebbe, and Zog L'chaim. And Zog L'chaim. Now, the Rebbe had afraid of Rebbe, of course, but the point is, Zog L'chaim, when you say L'chaim, you should just know you get all the keach, so L'chaim to all of us, we should all have keach, we should all have, literally, push it in the most practical level. The Rebbe is a little nachas, and our as shluchim, we have a tafkid to make sure that the Rebbe is a little nachas. So L'chaim. L'chaim,
Yishkech Meilech. As mentioned, we'll get back to you soon. Thank you so much. As mentioned a few times earlier, Tafshin Mem Beis, Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe spoke about the Mitzvah Eis Sefer Torah, that every single Yid should have a Eis and a Sefer Torah of his own, and not only for the Yaldi Yisroel. One of the Bachrim one of the panelists now, who was a Bachir then, had a stark connection to this Mitzvah Sefer Torah, and he was a big doer in this Indian, as you will soon hear from him. And L'chaim. Rebbe Aaron Slonim, please. The Rebbe Shlich in Binghamton.
L'chaim. So I think, Benji, you asked me to speak about something else and this. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when we were Bachrim, particularly this actually happened in middle of Tafshim Mem Aleph. And as we know, there were many Verbringens Shabbos that the Rebbe had gekocht, and he says, I roye b'maise b'poel, mitzel zeh mefarsim zayin. So we were sitting a group of Bachim and thinking, what is the best way to be able to at least give over Eiroes, the Poel Mamish from this Shabbos Verbringen to at least to Shluchim, to be able to bring it everything B'maise B'Poel. So I was Eicha myself, and it was then also Loza Reichik, that we decided that we're going to start a special Shluchim service that every Mitzvah Shabbos will call the Shluchim and give them over Nekudis of Eiroes B'maise B'Poel from this Shabbos Verbringen. And you have to visualize Tafshim Mem Aleph. There was no fax, and there was, just even a long distance call was not a cheap thing in those days. But we felt if you read the Sichas and you see the Koch, how the Rebbe wanted the Inyonim on the Chabtam B'Poel, and we know that the Shluchim, this is one of the most important thing that Shluchim wanted to know what is Neger Bepoel. So we sent out a notice to at least to the Shluchim in Artzis Abris and Canada, to the Et Shluchim, that we want to start a Shluchim service that we're going to give over after Shabbos by phone on the Kudah for 2-3 minutes. And in those days, we started with Et Shluchim, with the idea that every Et Shliach, whoever works under them in the different shtetlach, that they will give over the Eiroes Bepoel. And Tavshim B'Malev, there was a very, compared to today, was literally a very, very limited amount of shluchim that we were able, between me and Loza Raichik, were able to cover all the shluchim in about an hour and a half to call. We had 2 phones in 14, 18 in my dorm room, and every Motzei Shabbos we went and called the shluchim. But we know that everything in this kind of a way is important to be connected to an official meiset from the Rebbe. So we felt that we have to do it through Tzacham Rekosi. So we went to Reb David Raskin, Olav Shalom. We told him about the idea, and in the beginning he was not sure about it, but then he agreed that yes, it's the right thing. And then all of the duchim of everything what we did, we sent into the Rebbe to Reb David Raskin, and Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to come overcome entfers of Niskabel with Yoske, including there were 2 times in those 2.5, 3 years that we were doing it, that the Rebbe gave mashke by the Shabbos Fabrengen for whoever is going to do a Emshech Fabrengen, the Mekoimei will be able to get from this mashke. So we took from the mashke from the Rebbe. It says we didn't get from the Rebbe, but the mashke that the Rebbe gave to Reb David Raskin, we took the mashke and we sent it out to all of the shluchim who were in our shluchim service special, and they got the mashke within a day and a half, 2 days. And it was a moedik shturim that everyone was able to have. And again, I'm saying in those days, it was not an easy thing. And of course, years later, there was Fax Asicha, there was Chazore Motzei Shabbos, that Reb Yoel gave Chazore, some other Chazrim gave Chazore through WLCC. But for the period from mid of Tavshim Mem Aleph till the end of Tavshim Mem Gimel, this is something that we did every time when there was a Fabrengen, and this was something that really made a big shturim from shluchim, because we got the feedback that this was something that they never had before, because as we all know, of course, shluchim will have relatives in Kron nights, will call up after Shabbos what was, but to get a synopsis of Eiroes and Meise Bepoel was the Rebbe Shturim to Vil and Mizel Gleich Upton. This was something that it was very uplifting to the Shlichus. This is regarding Memalef Membeis. Membeis, we're zeicha here to hear in the panel from many people expressing about the year of Tavshim Membeis, and going back to the Ini from Sefer Torah, just to give a few corrections of what was said before, that Rosh Hashanah, when the Rebbe was the first time the Rebbe spoke about it was Erev Rosh Hashanah, Bekitzer, and he asked, but then Rosh Hashanah by the Fabrengen, towards the end of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe started talking more in details. And by the Fabrengen Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe only mentioned some Hatmimim, bebald as der Ingen, was im Rede wegen Achtes von Teire, das sich annehmen von Bnei Teire. Und Bnei Teire seien doch die Talmidei Yeshivas von Shivas Tam Hatmimim. So therefore, they should be the ones who should start this Sefer Teire for Achdus, soll sich annehmen Dafke von Shivas Tam Hatmimim. Beis Rivke was added later. If you read or heard the Siches, Yud Gimel Tishrei was a Sturmdike Siche to go in more in details, and the Rebbe was Masbir, das nicht der Inyan of Machen Geld, back and forth, like mentioned before, that there was no Agbola of $1, but the Rebbe also did not want from the Ktsei Sheni that this should become a money maker thing, but he was like talking to the Meisdes, to Hatmimim, why is it nicht angehabt of dem Indien, das Eichet, was kann bringen Geld. Anyways, I was involved at least for the first half a year, the first Sefer Torah b'miyuchet, helping out, counting. Every Friday, the Rebbe wanted to have a detailed duch, how many people sich verschrieben in the Sefer Torah. So we had to collect from all the Bachim who went to Miftzayim and anyone else, when the Geleiter were involved, we collected because Hatmimim was the place for the Sefer Torah Hatmimim that everyone had to give their zettlach on the geld. So we used to count Friday afternoon, literally like a few hours before Shabbos, to count everything, how many people registered, and as mentioned before, then in one of the Fabrengens, Lech Lecha, and the Chagav Shabbos Lech Lecha Membeis, the Rebbe said, even though this was, I'm sure everybody knows that Tavshim Membeis, and even Memalev Shnas Akel, there wasn't a Fabrengen every Shabbos. Memalev, there was almost every Shabbos, but Membeis not every Shabbos. So Lech Lecha, Tavshim Membeis was already after Zayin Cheshvan, and the Rebbe said that one of the reasons of the Fabrengen from Shabbos Lech Lecha Membeis was to be me'erer about the Sefer Torah Klali, and he gave a chelik then, how many people were.
Rabbi Slonim, we lost you. Rabbi Slonim, do you hear me? Okay, I guess we'll go back to Rabbi Slonim when he gets back on. Rabbi Vogel, can you unmute yourself, or Levi, can you please unmute Rabbi Vogel? Levi Katz, if you can please unmute Rabbi Vogel. Fortunately, the
Okay.
yeah. So just going back to before about when the Rebbe started, when the Chaved Lahak started the Meilech, you recall the Rebbe coming into 770 with holding a sefer.
It was Erev in Kippur Tashim and Gimel, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere around there. Maybe it's Mandalat. I'm really not sure, but I remember what the excitement. I used to hang around, or Meilech probably remembers, I used to hang around Lahak a lot and help them in my little ways. And the excitement when the Rebbe came in to the shul holding another sefer underneath his siddur, and what sefer is it? And I had to realize it was a Hanachas Lahak, a bound sefer. It was the Yakros, the Rebbe showing in public his appreciation that the sefer, not the sichas, was not just printed every single week; it was actually bound and available for everybody to buy a complete sefer. Because the Rebbe mentioned many times the dafka dover shebitfus is ladeiros, and the tfus seemed to mean not just kontresim, but actually a sefer, which is mamish ladeiros. That's.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Rabbi Slonim, it's good to have you back. Levi, if you can please unmute Rabbi Slonim. All right, L'chaim, please continue where you left off.
L'chaim, I don't know where you heard me left off. Anyway, so throughout the, I don't know when I got disconnected, so I'm going to go back a little bit from before. The Shabbos Lech Lecha was a special Fabrengen in connection with the Sefer Torah for Achdus Bnei Yisroel. And the Rebbe gave a chelik then that how many people were, and then became a bigger shturim to be able to register more even in the Sefer Torah. And the truth is, at least for the first few months, there's almost no Fabrengen that the Rebbe did not speak about Sefer Torah of Achdus, either bariches or bekitzer. So we saw how it's negia benefesh van Rebbe bakosha nafshis about the inyan of the Sefer Torah. I remember we also were involved. Rabbi Zirkind was the sefer for this Sefer Torah, and all of the Bochrim from 770 were divided to be Magia at least 3 times the Amudim of the Sefer Torah. In other words, we understood that the Rebbe's cook in this Sefer Torah is that the Bochrim should be involved in them, not only in a Ruchnisdike way, but in every detail of the Sefer Torah to be involved. And later on, when it was the time when it was the Siyum of Sefer Torah, and the Rebbe and there was decided to do the Sefer Torah, the Siyum, there was even a question by the Vaad, David Raskin, the Vaad from the Yeshivas, who asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe would be Messiah the Sefer Torah, the Gashmis, to be Messiah the Sefer Torah. And I don't remember exactly the Lashon, but the Rebbe something says Yoresi in another word, and he did not want to be in this union. Another nekuda that I think, I don't know if it's important to mention tonight, is that the Rebbe was a mishtatef in every Sefer Torah of Achdus. In other words, anyone who wrote a Sefer Torah of Achdus Yisroel, we know that there were later on not only Hatmimim and Besrivke, there were other. So in every Sefer Torah that was Achdus Yisroel, the Rebbe was personally mishtatef for himself and for the Rebbetzin, and gave money for it to be a chelik from the Sefer Torah for Achdus. So going back of what Benjy mentioned before, I think as Evi Miretach the Bochim gehen sich kochen in Shnas Tovshim and Beis, that is the same kvius, and it's Arboim Shono, that leider in Eze Sibbe Shetiya is der Indian of the Mifza Sefer Torah, geworden sehr vernachlässigt. There are other Mifza Sefer Torahs, Lischus, Atzole, Lischus, all kinds that are wonderful, great things, but it's not the Mifza with the Rebbe Gemont of Achdus Yisroel, Pshute Achdus Yisroel. So we'll give a gleiche Sach that all of the Bochim from all yeshivas on sich unternehmen as this coming year should be a big sturm in them Indian, and today for if all the Bochim will sturmen in the Mifza Sefer Torah to finish up 304,000 letters is not Leiba Shomayim, and it's Korev Adova b'meid, and this will for sure bring Nachas Ruach zum Rebbe, and then definitely it would bring all the brachas that the Rebbe said, what the Sefer Torah, the Klolim, the Achdus Yisroel will bring to Am Yisrael, that we should take it from the Yad, Zachzel mit den Rebbe, Dola Mato, V'hu Yigolein.
Chaim b'chaim, Shekayach Rabbi Slonim.
Just a smaller order, Rabbi Greenberg mentioned before about 2 inyonim that the Rebbe actually spoke about Tovshim Mem Aleph, not Mem Beis, about the Meneres and about the Luches was Kesiso Mem Aleph, and it wasn't Mem Beis, but in Mem Beis hat man sich gekocht in der Minyan.
Rabbi Greenberg, since you were just mentioned, I'd like to ask you about the following scene. We know that upstairs until Tavshin Memches, the Rebbe would daven Mincha Ma'ariv upstairs. After the Yistalkos the Rebbe started davening downstairs with Chassidim. In regards to the bench that the Rebbe sat on, if I'm not mistaken, Tashim and Babes, they got a new bench, a new cushion, and there was some comment from the Rebbe about that. If you can please share.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to comment to Rabbi Slonim. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to Rabbi Slonim. He just mentioned that he started the phone calls to make Chazor at Motzei Shabbos. So I must say that Mem Gimel Mem Daled, I was a shlichus in Seattle, and it used to be a debate among the Bochim, what's better to spend the money? To go every month to the Rebbe, or every Motzei Shabbos to spend the money on a telephone call of an hour and a half to New York to find out what happened Shabbos. And I wanted to know that in those days the telephone calls cost a lot of money, and I chose to know every Motzei Shabbos what the Rebbe spoke, and Aaron Slonim was my mashpia, and I used to call him every Motzei Shabbos, and at least we were an hour and a half on the phone. He mamish with chazore of the entire thing, mamish in an amazing way. So I must say a big thank you for him. Second thing about the luchas and the thing, the Rebbe, maybe you're right, but there was long verbringings, especially by the Kanim and the Menera, that the Rebbe spoke in Membeid as well. So probably was a hemshech to what happened. Now we'll go back to what your question. So negate to the bench, yes, it was I remember when I came to 770, I couldn't believe it when I used to see how the Bochum used to see right after the Rebbe left Mincha, Bochum used to sit on the Rebbe's bench, and not only the Rebbe's bench, on the Rebbe's place, mamish. I was shocked, and I remember there was one Bochum, I want to mention his name, who was mehader to see, with the second the Rebbe left, he was already sitting there, when the Elam was not standing by Mincha, so to speak. Before there was a extra verbringing, and I guess it started with the Aores. Someone wrote about it in the Aores. The Rebbe gave all verbringing, the Rebbe all sicher, and there was going on, and then Ben Shechem. The Rebbe explained that the Vaad it's not his Mokum Kavua, and the Mokum Kavua of the Rebbe was talking. Those who remember in those years in Membeid, there was several Shabbosim that Mincha was in the Rebbe's place where the Rebbe used to bring in the early years, which means right by the window between Cheder Rishon and Cheder Sheni, and actually it was a very special machzeh. Rabbi Slonim saw it more than me. I was there to see many Shabbosim. It was a very special machzeh to see how the Rebbe comes in to Mincha, and the Zal, because the Rebbe used to walk the entire Zal to his place, so almost half of Zal had to be empty to be able to have enough space for the Rebbe's table and for the standard, and for the Rebbe going to the Bimah, coming back. It's a whole parade that was going on there. And I do remember 1 year later, not when they started probably mamish in the later years, and the Rebbe once or twice davened Shabbos Mincha was a surprise actually. Nobody was ever Shabbos Mincha. And it happened to me there was a pushkin on the Rebbe's table. You know those big pushkins in 770, those metal pushkins. And the question was what to do with the pushkin. And there was a whole debate what to do with that. The Rebbe is coming in for Mincha and the pushkin is sitting there. We have to move the pushkin. It's muktzeh. And it was a whole thing, and the Rabbi Marla was standing there davening ba'avodah kedarke b'kodesh, and the Bochum came over to him and started debating with him, and he wouldn't answer, and he was only smiling, listening to the Bochum, to everything. Afterwards, about 20 minutes before Milcha, the Bochum came running. He said, "Shnaim she'asu p'turim." They ran to push away, and everything was fine. And he knew that's going to happen anyway, so he wasn't bothering to give explanation. At the point in going back, so that was what you asked. The Rebbe explained it. Not Mokum Kavua, the Meilech because the Rebbe said there's not enough place, and the Rebbe said he's sitting there because it's closest to come in from the Rebbe's room. The Rebbe from Leili say al Rosh Am, not to make it harder on the Eilam. So Meilech, the Rebbe said that he's sitting there, and because there's not enough place in 770 upstairs for the Bochum to learn, he wants the Bochum to stay there. But I never said that in place. Akopanim,
this was on Simchas Torah Membeis?
No, it wasn't Simchas Torah. One of the Shabbosim now. I just want to mention when he gave this before when he gave to Mashiach.
Before you continue, it's a schus to mention the person who built that bench, Rebbe Aaron Slonim. It's a great student that he has. He should be gesund, and hopefully he can join us later on the program. He was involved with furniture then, and he was zeichet to build that bench for the Rebbe, which the Rebbe used for many years to come. Chaim.
Just to mention one more thing about Mashiach. The Yiddish Mashiach was the big shturim of Shibana Beis Hamikdash. Everyone knows the song Shibana Beis Hamikdash. When the whole song started, it was like Beinam and Beis. And when the ganze, it was a rally on Beinam and Beis. It was not supposed to be a rally. Shabbat, the Rebbe said he's not going to speak. But the Lepel Mamish, the Rebbe, Nevul Teva it could change. The Rebbe changed it, and the Rebbe came down. And by the end of the last Sikha, the Rebbe said, "As Faran Anigen." When he gave of the tefillah from the Yirot Shibbonis Hamikdash, and the Rebbe said, "We stand kemen dem Nigen." And Sof Kosov, the Rebbe said, "The Werter sind unsere," and Sof Kosov, the Nigen is echt unsere. And when the Rebbe finished the Sikha, there was a whole tumult pushing the Nigen. I remember I was standing in a group walking with Avon Free. People were pushing him to go, and he didn't want to be sure he can go. And someone was running to Lipsker. He was the musician, and somehow Telashevsky was found, and he went off and he sang the first time the Nigun. And immediately, as soon as he started, the Rebbe started with the clapping with the hand. I'm finishing can't hand him chazan. He was like, that was going, and that's how the Nigun started. And the biggest, to me, the biggest surprise was it's Beis Steven. It's Beis Steven. The Rebbe came was also a Putznik for bringing.
Rabbi Greenberg, before we get to Beis Steven, so from that for bringing on every single weekday for bringing, the Rebbe would ask the Chazan Telashevsky to start to Shibana.
I think it started. I don't know if the Telashevsky started, but the Shibana, the Rebbe started to sing the Shibana, right? Rabbi Slonim, the Shibana started almost every bringing from then on. The
Slonim, you add something?
But I don't know if Telashevsky said it or not. But what I remember is Beis Steven, the Rebbe came into the Fabringen, was a Shai Fabringen, that was in the Shibana of Samigdash. So nobody thought of anything. I mean, those who stood behind the Rebbe maybe so. But Rafael Mamesh, as soon as the Elon finished Boruch Hertz, the Rebbe started by Da, and the whole place stood up. It was such a shock to the Elon. No Nigel Far Maimer. That was the Nigel Far Maimer, Shibana of Samigdash. I remember till now the shock. Even though probably those who stood behind saw the Rebbe taking the handkerchief and so on, but people were not thinking, because you used to, if there is a Maimer, there must be a Nigel for a Maimer. It was Shibboleth Hamikdash, and the Rebbe started immediately. So there was a Sturm, that year was a Sturm the year in Ali Inyonim. And if we had more time, I'll just say one thing about Simchas Torah. That year, Simchas Torah, Lamed Vov, when I was by the Rebbe, I was under the table with the kids, and I saw the Rebbe's sarcophagus from Amish. You know, when you everyone who was by the Rebbe knows that there is a huge chiluk where you stood in 770. How close you stood to the Rebbe. It was a huge chiluk. So that's Simchas Torah Lamed Vov. I was Mamish under the table. Mamish with the Rebbe's feet. And I remember how the Rebbe used to make with his head. The Rebbe used to put his hand on the Rashag. I remember that the Rebbe used to put. Maybe Rabbi Slonim, if you remember, or father remember, the Rebbe used to put his the Rebbe used to take his sharvul, his sleeve, and put it on the Rashag's. Remember that? I don't know what the pshat on that. Pshat can learn Beravim, but I think that's what I remember from the box in the bleeding cup. Anyway, the Rebbe used to make with his head, the Rebbe's face was shining, and it's hard to describe the Rebbe's face with Chater Ba'akofes. And the Rebbe made to every parameter and then to the kids. Mamish equal. The same way, but for the kids. So I remember that. So in days I came to 770. I said I must be next to the Rebbe, next to the Ches. I was standing back there, but after that year I never stood there. Why? Because as mentioned before, the Rebbe spoke 2 sichas Leil Shmini Atzeres. There's like 2 sichas Leil Simchas Torah, and from that place it was harder to hear. So after that year I changed, and I was standing every Simchas Torah by the Rebbe's bima from the davening. However, that's in Chasterim, when the Rebbe finished, the Rebbe came out of the chet after the kafir. So the custom is to be, the people used to scream, the Levin Barayor. And the Rebbe used to say, Amen. Anyway, the Rebbe came to the beginning of the Shvil, and the Shvil used to be full with people. And literally, you had to throw out bodies to be able to let the Rebbe go back. But the Rebbe is standing and waiting, because there was no way to go. The Rebbe had to wait. But I'm standing mamish next to the Rebbe. And I see people scream down by Yor. Was a 70-year-old boy. So I said quietly, not quiet, loud, but not screaming. I said, 11 by Yor. And the Rebbe didn't bechal move. Like, it was like, it was like the second thought to me, the Rebbe was telling me, it's not for you, it's not for kids. It's for elder chsinim. But then, what I remember, how the Rebbe was holding this small secretary with both the hands like this. And the way the Rebbe stood, and I was mamish standing so close, the Rebbe's face, you felt the Rebbe was not there. There was such a reimimus. I was standing next to the Rebbe. It was such a reimimus at that moment. The Rebbe stood as the Rebbe didn't see the shvil, didn't see the people. He wasn't there b'chlal. And it felt, you saw what made the Rebbe. So just our personal memory. And then after that, all the years I was standing on the other side. And Taka, when you stood by the Rebbe's Omad, by the bima next to the Rebbe's wall, it was very hard. It was not easy to see the covers. Of course, when it came in Ches, it was already a bima, and this was much easier. But the year before, just one more word, and then one more word about based on what we talked about the ganze Verbringen Heint is kein Minisch der Rabbe, 40 Jahre. So first of all, the Rebbe grabbed the Welt Schokotzach and Chesotzach, why it's important to write every letter, every Jew letter secretary. It's like, as a bocher, you live in 70, you didn't realize the Welt Schokotzach and Chesotzach. It's now 40 years later today when you're in the real world and you see today with Corona and everything what's going on with the Welt Schokotzach and Chesotzach, you understand what's made of the Rebbe Zog. As jeder Reiner was wahrscheinlich Sekretär, and had the Rebbe, even when it came to, if you remember, Rabbi Slonim remembers, after Tishrei given out, the Rebbe had a private Yechidus, secret Yechidus with the Askonik Latzisol, Rabbi Medanchik and the Shvelmovsky, and so when a big sword, then we heard it was about the Rebbe sending to Machen as Sekretär Fatal for the Israeli army, by the IDF, and nobody should know about it, and to have permission from Tzal, with the Rabbi Roshi from Tzal, all thing. Then summer, beginning of summer, when there was something going on in Israel, but Fabregan, the Rebbe said, as it was a Chayalim were falling, the Rebbe said, because I was geton with the Sekretär from Tzal, we must get dafton, or das nicht geschehen. And what was misdared because it was all delayed, Tzal wasn't agreeing, the Rabbi Roshi was big chokhmah, the whole thing going on until they finally happened.
Rabbi Greenberg, can you translate that, please?
What?
Can you translate that? Can you translate
what?
What the Rebbe said?
The Rebbe said as if everybody, if the Askonim would complete, would start to prepare in time, and the Rebbe told them the Chayalim would not die on the front. That means that when we didn't understand, I was a kid, we didn't understand what's made of the Rebbe Zog Machas Sefatere. The Rebbe Poshet hat geraten mit dem jüdischen Volk in der ganzen Welt. We didn't understand what made the Rebbe Zog Sefatere. The Volk stand, a Rebbe Sefatere, a Mifta from Rebbe. It's not a Mifta from Rebbe. When the Rebbe Zogt a Zach, the Rebbe Poshet meant to keep sure that the Rebbe protected the entire Yiddish world, the protected the world not to fall apart. And the Vaad Rabbi Slonim told before, mit der Schreiben, Sefatere, it's very important, as the Rebbe Zogt a Zach, Hein, and we said the Welt fought voneinander, the Rebbe's word, we have to make the Sefatere and Takem, nicht the Sefatere, we must get on Moshe, the Rebbe said, one of the Rabbi Slonim remembers, one of the Fabregas, the Rebbe said, as a feeble die, was sich verschrieben, Mashiach Sefatere, in der Rebbe, the Schwert geist, nach der Sefatere, darf man sich verschreiben, noch einmal, Chadoshim Abkorim, noch einmal Itzter, in the Sefatere from 8th so. That means that what they did in Kronites, the Baal Shem Tov Sefatere, so a great Zach, Mashiach Sefatere is echt a great Zach. Mashiach Sefatere, was kein Gräste sein für das, aber der Rebbe, als der Rebbe heißt, machen sie, ach, das ist so, darf ich machen, geht, Baal Shem Tov Sefatere. Das machen Sefatere, ach, das ist so, der Rebbe geht. Das ist Sache, der Rebbe sagt, das ist die Sache, darf ich machen, Baal Shem Tov der größte Sache, und Mashiach Sefatere ist echt eine größte Sache. But that's not, that's the Rebbe say, oh, gibt es Sefatere. I'm just saying, with that verstehen, and the Rebbe gives a Eiro, it's not a Eiro. Das ist a Sache, was Mamesh keeps the whole world together. Und der Vater Rebbe sagt, Pikuach Nefesh, the Rebbe sees it, we don't see it. The Rebbe says, Pikuach Nefesh, every 8 years. What does that mean? The Rebbe Poshet, Nirate Beged Miden. Not a joke. And then there's one more thing about Koyesh at the Rabbi is a von, the Rebbe said, for bringing Membeis, they never understood, and because I happened to be Misazik in Indian, I understood that. So that's interesting vote. The Rebbe said, maybe I was only remembers, as Sevet Aldevach and Pelish Esforim, with the Baal Shem Tov and the Gilgul from the Rasad, and was Sadi going. The Rebbe right away said that I said to someone about a Hayyid from Pelish Esforim, he said, Chagas. So the Rebbe said, I told him, every person has Chabad, and he has Chagas also. So Chagas is the Echat. So then the Rebbe said a interessante word, which I was puzzled for 40 years what it meant. The Rebbe said, I'm schreiben, when you're going to print the Sicha, you're going to print the Anocha, and Meilech maybe remembers that, when you get schreiben the Anocha, noch Shabbos, we should write, I'm not me'asher and not me'vatul. I'm not me'asher, I'm not saying that Sidazeh, I'm not saying that the Asezemes, as the Bashem is a guilt from Rasag, and I'm not mevatul that he is not. So what is it? Yes and nicht. What does it mean? I'm not me'asher and mevatul. The Rebbe accepted or not accepted. Then Shabbos later in the Anoche, in the Ores, was geschrieben. It's a bewusste Meise, but Shem is a guilt from the Eden Tzvas. Everyone knows about he was a guilt from the Tzvas, and then there is a there is another sefer that says Gilgul from Nishmas Chanech, and the Noach is a sefer that says that, and the Rebbe, they also the Rachaim, that if the Rachaim would go to Tishrei, the Baal Shem Tov, the means, is Nefesh the David, and his Ruach the David. So what does that mean? The Rebbe gave a whole sicha. The Rebbe explained, Faran Tvei Inyan Migilgulim. Faran Neshama Yishana, our old Neshama that comes back to this world, that's a Gilgul, a regular Gilgul. Then the Faran Inyan and Gilgul, the Rebbe said, as in this Galga Neshama, mitzad Inyan Miyuched, but this Neshama needs to Uftar. It means that the Rebbe said the Baal Shem Tov is a Inyan Miyuched. He also add on Gilgul from this Inyan, but the Baal Shem Tov himself is not a Gilgul. So I still never understood what exactly it meant. So lately I found a Fabrengen from Chayel Lamed Gimel, and the Rebbe said that the Erste Sicher, the Rebbe says, and it's why we say it, because in Teres Menachem, they changed it. Teres Menachem, they're printing now the Sicher, they changed it. Why they changed? Because they never understood. They never thought that could be such a thing. The Rebbe said, the Rebbe spoke about the unit from the Alter Rebbe, the Neshama Chadosha. When the Rebbe spoke the Loshem about the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe said, both of them Neshama Chadoshas. And in Teres Menachem, they took it out because nobody ever heard about Shem Neshama Chadosha, so they wrote the Alter Rebbe Neshama Chadosha. If I check with the other Anocha from Arle Goldstein, also the Neshama Chadosha. And in Sichas Kiddush, I printed the Neshama Chadosha. So I went to look into it. So Lepel, I found out that there's a few other places the Rebbe it comes out from the Rebbe as the Baal Shem Tov was also some kind of a Neshama Chadosha. So it could be the pshat what the Rebbe said in the Fabringen, as is not me'asher and not mevatel, as take what the Rasag is a gilgul, as the Baal Shem Tov gilgul from the Rapsari Goen, it's true, but not like a gilgul from a regular person, which is a neshama yishona that the Rapsari Goen came again in this world. Baal Shem Tov is, the Rebbe said, the Rebbe quoted in the Fabringen, the Remender Ledoker said, as the Baal Shem Tov was miyuchod, and he said, min akadmeinim lahoya kumoy. That from the Kadmeinim, he said the Rebbe mentioned that from Avoitz Liyanke, min akadmeinim lahoya kumoy. That means that he definitely was a Neshama Chadosha, but not maybe in the same level that the Rebbe. But I finally understood what the Rebbe said as anish me'asher, anish me'batl, meaning as a take the Baal Shem Tov is the Rasag maybe was in a Baal Shem Tov, but not as a regular Gilgul. Baal Shem Tov Neshama Chadosha. And the Eve Rasag was with them mechubatzem. And I can those are some avot, and we can say that the other word for him is the Tifkeit Emek Basar Emek. And now it's starting the 40 years, the Ersh beginning. I mean, cooked up to the Sichas from Tavshim and Beis, and Mamish is endless what we can get in the Anyway, Chaim L'chaim.
Yeah, Chaim L'chaim, L'chaim. Want to get back to you soon, don't leave. Another Bacher who was a 15-year-old Bacher in the year Tavshim and Beis, which hopefully today's purpose of today's panel is actually to encourage all the Bachrim, Light and all Anash to be learning this the kviyas of this year of Tashim and Beis, to go through the entire year. We have with us the Asra of Kilos Chabad in Chicago, Boruch Hertz, who was zeichet to be by the Rebbe in Tashim and Beis, and we'd like him to say a few words about that tekufa. Shekayach Rabbi Hertz.
I'd rather listen than speak. I enjoyed hearing the whistle, but I would maybe add, not on the level of Hatmimim or explain the shittas. I'll just speak in a certain point, an angle which affected me personally. The first Tishrei I was Tavshim Mem, full Tishrei, the Mem Aleph, the Mem Beis. In base, I came from Yisroel. I was in Shivas Teresemis, 15 years old, and I came for that year, for the month of Tishrei. And after Tishrei, I went back to Yisroel. So I'll say a few things which maybe it was touched upon, but maybe on a personal note. Number one, I remember Memalef. We all know Hakel. There was a Sikha every night, and it was a Giloyim. I came in base Sukkos. Nobody was clear, at least I did not know, and many did not know, if the Rebbe will continue having a Sikha every night. And it wasn't clear. I personally remember being in the front of 770, and the Rebbe that time turned around and started the Sikha. So Yontif started the Sikha. Bechlal, you should know the Sichas Sukkos was a very different Gilear. Bechlal, the way that Rebbe looked, there's a certain closeness. The Rebbe was Sol Upanov, there was a certain look Bechlal the Rebbe, and also the style Sikha was Bechlal different style for bringing. So right away that night there was a lot of pushing and it was mamish like I remember it was pushing because people were not ready for the Sikha. They thought it was a special thing of hakel, but no one really thought it would be necessarily a hemshech. I remember following then, we saw that there would be a new Seder in the Sikhas. So the following day, we waited in 770, and right after davening, probably up a whole night, the Rebbe then spoke about, and after the morning, and after davening, the minute the people on the front benches left, myself and other Bochrim ran to grab places. And for those years, I had for many, many years, Tishrei, from and base on, all the way through the nuns, I had a place the fourth row. And we got it after davening to hold the place, and we turned around, left a few minutes, but every day we were there the whole day till the Sikha. And in a way, there's a few Nekudas of Sikha. B'chal the Sikhas, then the Sukkos, when base was started, that it was the Rebbe's, after the Sikha, there was groups of Chazara. Someone touched upon it, but it was unbelievable. People were chazering Sikha again and again at the place. But Pasha, you never saw that this seer of the Chazara Sikhas, you never saw this any other time in that level in those years. Maybe laying the nuns, that kind of thing. But that level, the people much stayed for an hour or two in Chazar the Sikhas, and it was the energy of the whole week. And I remember and every year there was a chiddush with it. The shpils that were tied in, and every bechlal from in base started. You saw there was a mahalach in the sichas. They tied in with the Rashi, with the yom. This year from in base, upon Shana they tied in with the chiddush to the day. The next year was another mahalach, and the mahalchim really went a certain direction. Akadekach, I remember that the sichas was the energy that Matzah Yontiv, after 2 days, nights, not sleeping and being, up a whole night, and then doing a little bit extra, waiting in line 6 a.m. for the first tickets, and then going, and then the whole time, someone said you can listen to the Sikha clearer upstairs because the Rebbe didn't use a microphone downstairs, but there was a hookup upstairs in the base of Medrash. You could hear it. And I wasn't interested because being the front there, that experience alone of those sikhs, the Rebbe said, and the sikhs, the words were very special. That's just one nakuda which I can share for people who, it's not on the esoteric level, just in the eyes of a 15-year-old bacha, it was a very meaningful thing. I want to say one more thing about the tkufa of Sekretariat, which Michoel, I know someone mentioned it started Chanukah and Emceed, the big Sturm, the Kasicha, that was Erev Shana, and Michoel that year also, the Rebbe didn't daven with the Olam, every davening in the morning, but slichas, because it was the Kriyas Rosh Hashanah was Tuesday, Wednesday, there was a long slichas that Rebbe came then, and every day 7 o'clock in the morning the Rebbe. So the whole Tishrei had that kind of thing. When it's Torah, the big sikha, I mean, there was many sikhs. The whole every time the Rebbe mentioned Torah, the Rebbe mentioned Torah. But Yud Gimel Tishrei, that was mamish. I remember that was mamish sturming very strongly, and he spoke about he said even so much on money. He said even what's a pella is that even the Meisters he spoke about Misrifka and Hatmimim, they could have started a Torah. People complaining. I get reports of 50, 100, and they don't understand that they take $1. They can even think about it. What Kaspi? It's not about money. It's like Achdus to call Yisroel, and it's an unbelievable Indian. However, even if you want to go in the grubber seichel of money, you still could understand it, and it was very sturmdik at that time. Bechal, and I was when I pointed that every time mentioned, we had the Yechidus. I went back to Teres Emes. Bechal then. The Yechidus practice were already finished, and the Yechidus was in the Rebbe's room. the Rebbe's room, groups went to the Rebbe's room. What before was in the Beis Medrash, it was upstairs in a Tachten, and then later went to downstairs in 770. But then it was in the Rebbe's room. And the Rebbe's room, we went in a whole group of Bachrim Teresemis, 60 years old, and the Rebbe then, in the Yechidus, mentioned again the Sefer Torah. Pasha became the Indian of it was clear, wow, it was clear, Baruch Hachamo, that it was actually something that the Rebbe wanted on a very stern way. I just say something which, I mean, today you can read all the Fabrengens. I'll tell you personally, the bracha of the Bachrim was Erev in Kippur. Erev in Kippur, age 15, I was not in the room. I was in the sukkah outside. I went right after the bracha klali, which was the Rebbe gave the bracha, and then immediately went there to grab a place, and I was right in the front of the sukkah. I remember then, the Rebbe spoke about then, every year was something different. That year the Rebbe spoke about Ufaratzta. And he said, he said, like in the following year, said, there's different things, but that year, I remember the Rebbe clearly said Ufaratzta. And it was clear that the Rebbe wanted that Ufaratzta should do in a big way, which I can tell you, in Tishrei, when the Bach would come for the whole month, there was times that, you were busy, but that time when the Sefer started, I remember Yosef Kesler, all of Shalom, got buses, and he used to take Bachrim on buses, like for Chabad in California, he was taking buses. I think that was the first buses that went out, and these true people were buying letters like crazy. It was unbelievable. You saw Pashit that there was such an excitement in the world about Isis and Torah, that it was unbelievable. And continue when I was later at Yisroel, you had so many people. Consider and different Rebbes were all signing for it, and people were buying thousands of letters. It wasn't something you had a mitzvah to beg people. When we used to go push it on the Shabbos and 3 times, and the Rebbe still the whole year. I remember even Shavuos time, Mamish the morning, so the whole day till Mamish till the convention, selling ISIS, and people were buying on every level. I never saw personally a mitzvah like that, which the world was so excited about, and there was so many, and there was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were buying Pashat letters, and Torah after Torah was being completed. People were Pashat buying it in a very, very huge way, which was another thing on base. Another thing, just say one more nakuda, mentioned before, that year, I remember the Fabrengen never spoke about the luchis and the menorah, all the different things, which was revolutionary, because I remember luchis, people started changing wherever they were. A lot of the Babich shuls had luchis nabrabua, and right away the preichas, people taking it down and changing it. That was the time and base that Rebbe changed it. One of the things that Rebbe Fabrengen spoke about a few times, and it's all from memory, that Michoel Seligson, he said that he was talking about l'chaim, it came 4 times. Rebbe said that you should take a mashka and have a little bit of l'chaim, and then so the shaila is, what do you do the rest of the bottle? You can't drink so much mashka with the rest of the bottle. You make sure that many Yidden will say l'chaim with the mashka, and nishta kavana is to leave the bottle of a Pesach, and then you have a shaila of chamash over a Pesach. If it's on the guy, the shaila is to finish the bottle and make sure many Yidden, I think, and explained that it's like a mayan. A mayan is a well. When you have a mayan, even one drop of water is matar the whole thing, and then it's like a well, and the Rebbe then tied it into the Torah again, and said that Yiddish buys 1 letter. Even the Rebbe explained in the Pilpul that it's not really writing a whole Torah. It's mash in the Torah. Every Yid needs a letter in the Torah. When you're buying a letter, your mamash has a shaykh the whole Torah. Without your letter, the whole Torah can't exist. And he spoke many times that it's different. And I mentioned 4 different, like Sefer Torah writings. This is partially in Achtis Yisroel. When at that time bringing Simchas Torah, because of the whole Tkufa, which was then Bechlal, there was Masira Shtachim and this, the Rebbe was screaming then, and the Rebbe spoke about then again that he doesn't realize, tied in again to the Torah, 1 letter, 1 yid, 1 piece of Yisroel. It was all about the Nakuda that a yid has an erech 1, and you see Taka that in this thing, there was such an acceptance in the world that it was an unbelievable way. There's just a few nakudas of Tishrei. There's obviously a lot of things. I can say one more thing. I remember that year was the first time that I ever went on steps on Napoleon's march, and it's interesting that even though it seemed like in a way it was changed because in the past I never climbed in a chair, however, the simcha was not in any way less. And the Rebbe was unbelievable. That base specifically, I remember, was the Rebbe was very, very, the Tnu was very strong, and they were in the most unbelievable way. But we should know that year, as the Rebbe introduced Simchas Torah, the whole Simchas Torah, he was talking about the 7 days of dancing in the streets. That was a whole. It seemed like a whole new Seder in Lubavitch and a whole new kibush in the world, and that's just Stadt.
Rebbe Hertz, what changed that the Rebbe changed from the chair to the stairs?
You know why it changed? Mm-hmm. I was 15 years old. I can't answer the question. I'll be very honest with you. I'm sure the grace of I mean, there's a Gashmisdika answer. I think the Gashmisdika answer, which made my grab a seichel, but I don't know more than that. I only say what I know. In the eyes of a 15-year-old bacher.
Can you describe the scene from the eyes of a 15-year-old bacher of Napoleon's march from before the Kaddish and then the Rebbe onto the stairs?
I'll tell you something very, very poshut. I was 15 years old, and a 15-year-old bacher is not a strong. So the entire Yom Kippur, I was the bracha. I pushed by the front of the sukkah, had the bracha of the bacher. Entire day I stood. Entire day. Begashmas Rucha. Then I stood in the front. And then I pushed from after the end the best of my ability. You know, it's like not. I remember when I was young and I first came, I tried to make my own place for Tekiyas. I thought I'll have a Getsisa, B'Shas Maisa. But I said, if it has to happen, it's not the best place. It was Pashat, the thing. Well, Bacha, you know, a little kid pushing. But I can tell you that as we got into Mincha and the Ilan and the with Paul's March, it was such an uplifting. It was unbelievable. And if I remember correctly, it's all from memory, the Avinu Makenu was very long that year. The Avinu Makenu was very long, and the Rebbe Chlal, it wasn't stam. The Tnuus was very long. The Rebbe at that time, some years the Rebbe's talis was Chlal closed. I'm just telling you, it's all from. But that year, if I remember the Rebbe's talis was not closed. You could see the Rebbe right away. And I know you can correct me if I'm. It's all mamish from, but and it was such a kiruv that you almost felt like it was unbelievable kiruv. That's one. That's I can say. I want to say one more thing because you're asking also. B'chlal Shminat Atzeres, the many years I had was opposite in 70. Now I know that I was talking sichas. That year punked. Later years, I had a much better place, but it wasn't so close. But it was much better. But you couldn't hear a sikha. The noise was too high. I don't know who heard. Maybe the al-Chayzrim right near there. But I remember Gashmias. Bechlali should know. I mean, for people who were Simchas Torah, there's a lot of people in 770. It was much harder to hear the sikha pushing. It was much harder to hear. The sikha before Akofis, Shminat Atzeres, was very hard to hear. That year, I was happy to be closer. And I remember some of the nekudas of that sikha. But I'm saying Bechlal was also the chiddush. I was talking sikha because the Rebbe Bechlal, I don't remember then. I don't remember much after. Maybe if I'm correct, I'm not the thing. I don't remember the Shminat Atzeres by night should be Bechlal sichas. 3 sichas. I don't remember. So that was an unbelievable thing. And also the Isis in the sichas was very strong. There was very strong betuyim in those sichas.
Thank you very much, Rebbe Hertz. L'chaim. The ruach of Simchas Torah lasts through the next couple of weeks and months and throughout the year. L'chaim to you.
L'chaim bracha.
Rabbi Slonim from Binghamton. Was there anything you wanted to add before that you didn't have a chance to? About the Yosef Kesler signing up people Yidden Erev Shabbos. And I think you mentioned to me earlier on the phone that the Rebbe wanted a doch before every Erev Shabbos.
Yes, and I mentioned it before when I spoke.
I just want to correct myself about what I said before. The Rebbe spoke about Luchas, and I think it was Shabbos Tisa Tovshem Memalev, and then again Simchas Torah in the end of the Farbringen, and about the Menorahs, Yitake spoke in summer Tovshem and Beis, many from 3 or 4 Farbringens in the summer of Membeis, just to correct, because I was wrong when I said before. Yeah, the Rebbe wanted a duch every Friday. And it was like he used to ask, and I remember sometimes Binyamin, a label coming out, going to Reb David's office and asking the Rebbe Vaad of Duch, the Rebbe Vaad of Duch. It was one Friday that I remember that it was winter, and we were still waiting for Bachim to come back from Mifzoim and to give it in, and we wanted to give. Versteht sich, what a greater number is more nachas zum Rebbe. And the Rebbe was waiting because he had to, as usually Friday, he used to go home for a few minutes, like later Friday, late afternoon, and then come back right before Lichtbenchen. So it was mamish in the winter. It was, I would say, probably a half hour before Adlokas Neris, and we were. And label came like with Kaist, Rebbe Vaad, I can't gehen till he gets the duch. So we just gave it in. And then when the Rebbe came back, we gave another. There was then, I think, a few hundred more that were able to get in the 15, 20 minutes from Mifzoim. And for this duch, I think Reb David got a answer of an eskabel with Yoske Greenberg. But this was it's what gesehen about dem Rebbe, das gewende Gehr benefesh, dem Indian to verschreiben, was mehr eben in this Sefer Torah.
I remember hearing from Nuchi Gross, who was also very involved then, that Erev Yom Kippur that year, Tavshin Beis, that I was waiting for my grandfather to receive the final numbers of until that point. So we just see the chavivos of how much the Rebbe had in regards to getting the numbers and everything else connected to that. Rabbi Vogel, I see you're shaking your head. Is there something you want to add? So if you can please unmute Rabbi Vogel. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I'm just shaking my head and following. It's very, very interesting. But I was then in London actually for Gimel Tishrei. And I remember the phone call came from Mazkiris, and they said that the Rebbe wants to know a duch besides what was Erev Yom Kippur. The Rebbe wants to know an extra number, anything which was added, amount of Yidden who were added, and more, in other words, more letters in Sefer Torah which were bought between Erev Yom Kippur, when they gave him the last duch, and Yud Gimel Tishrei. And we sort of understood that Mustama the Rebbe was going to speak about it on Yud Gimel Tishrei. That was a whole sturm. There's another vortish I just want to mention, since I have the microphone right now, that the Indian of what's the word, the ois packen, the peklach from Tishrei, the Rebbe used to say that you have to unload your merchandise that you got during Tishrei. If I remember correctly, it was Chanukah Tashim and Beis. The Rebbe said that now we're in the process of unpacking what the merchandise that you got during Tishrei. I think it's the only time I heard the Rebbe referring to that in the middle of the year.
Oh, yes, one main aspect of Tavshin Mem Beis, which wasn't really discussed by Riches, was, of course, it was the Rebbe's Shnas HaShmenim. Tavri Samach Beis, Tavshin Mem Beis, it's Shmenim Shana. So, Rabbi Vogel, I don't think you were in America then. Did you come from Yof Nissen?
No. I was in England then.
Right, but now, did you hear the Sikha when the, actually, I'd rather ask Rabbi Slonim. Rabbi Slonim, do you remember the Sikha that Rebbe asked not to come for the Shnas HaShmenim, and then all those weeks leading up to Yof Nissen?
It was during a Kinus for Tzivis Hashem, Rosh Chodesh Nissen. So towards the end of the Kinus, so the Rebbe spoke the Sikha. What happened afterwards? You have many Gesoras, what people did.
What did the Rebbe say in that Sikha?
that Azevi Mikleibt sich to come here, whatever, and he gave reasons why not to come. It's before Pesach and it's money and a lot of reasons why not to come, and no reason to come. But those who was some verstanden was mit darf tun. How do we know? Because Yudalef Nissen by Fabrengen, before the Rebbe gave the Tanyas, he explained that he's giving the Tanyas for Divazanin because he, as the Eden was Zachmatir given, gekommen dort to be together, so he's giving the Tanyas. In Chetchen is befragt is die Schluchim was am gebring große Kvutzes, was am gat große Keruvim, but
I remember, and on this note, I remember once hearing from Rabbi Shimka Lazarov that he was here for Yom Nissen. So when he came to the Sunday, Rabbi Chadikov said, "What is this?" The Rebbe Doch said that people shouldn't come in, shluchim in general, not shouldn't come in for Yom Nissen. So he tells him, "What should I do? I came to buy fish for Yom Tov." And he said, "I never saw Rabbi Chadikov laugh so hard." So obviously it was niskabel, and of course everyone received the Tanya from the Rebbe that Fabringen. If you don't mind discussing that very, very rare occurrence.
Don't you need another panel before you Yudalef Nissen and Beis?
Listen, we'll go on until the next one. Firstly, did you know before the Fabringen that the Rebbe would be giving out Tanyas?
Of course.
I think the Rebbe mentioned it that the Shabbos before, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think so. But they knew that they printed, but they didn't know if the Rebbe himself is going to give it, or because the Tishrei Lametes, every Eirach and Shluchim for yeshivas, like I was there, Shliach in Seattle, Washington, all the Orchim and the Shluchim got a Tanya from the Rebbe, with the Rebbe's Chasimas Yad Kodshe and the Tanya. So there wasn't sure the Tanyas are printed if the Rebbe himself is going to give everyone, or it's going to be like Tov Shemim Dalet, the Rebbe gave it out through the Keil Jungelite. There was also a Tanya Yudalef Nissen, but it was through Keil Jungelite.
Right. Wow. So the Rebbe sat until what time, giving out Tanyas to Anoshim, Noshim, V'tav?
I think till about 5:30, 5:45. Then he went home, came back, went to the mikveh, went to the oil, came back, another Fabringen.
I think the Rebbe heard Kriya in the Zal before he left. Is that correct? Went upstairs first to hear Kriya. I think it was a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Vogel, can you correct me? It's Thursday, Yafnis? Levi, can you please unmute Rabbi Vogel? Rabbi Vogel.
Checking Chabad.org.
Oh, he's checking Chabad.org. Anyways,
No, Yudalef Nissen that year was on Sunday.
On Sunday, okay.
So Monday there became the Kriyas Torah, and unusually the Balkaira was Mendelbaum.
So Rabbi David Mendel lane for the Rebbe that Monday
If
morning.
I'm not mistaken, that's what I heard from some people. And so the Rebbe gave out Tanyas till I think after 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Rebbe came out to Kriyas Torah at 6:30. What I heard from people, I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. If you look at the video afterwards, I mean, it's amazing. The next Fabrengen, early Yud Gimel, and the Rebbe claps over there by Al Achas. It's amazing. The Shturim, the way the Rebbe's clapping, you never believe it's this a person who just turned 80 and physically working from Sunday morning till Monday night, not stopping for a moment. It's an amazing scene. You see if you watch the video. I mean, I was then in London, and so also big Shturim, people wanted to go, and was haste, and you can't go. Even it was Zalman Jaffe who got permission from the Rebbetzin to come. So he said that his Einikel, or by Yossi Lu, I think he's watching now, or listening. So he got, he also wanted to come. So the Rebbetzin said, how can you compare his Zayda to him? So Rabbi Zalman Jaffe understood from the Rebbetzin that friends, special friends, can come. They have permission to come.
The Rebbe said something like "nicht dir haben gemeint" or something like "nicht gute Freund."
That's
Very special.
Yeah.
The Gem just released this year actually a video of Yonaf Nissen and Beis. The Rebbe arriving to 770. Did you see it?
not yet.
Or I think it's Rabbi Klein driving before the car actually stops. The back door flies open, and the Rebbe comes out like, rejuvenated. The Yonafness in the morning.
Wow.
It was a very special. It's a very special tzir to see. All right, I think we're going to conclude today's panel. Just to hear closing words from our panelists. I'm not sure if they're all around still, but Rebbe Gurevitch, if you can give some divrei seirus of learning Tashim and Beis and living with the Rebbe this year as we start the Kviyas exactly how it was 40 years ago. Meilech, if you can please unmute Meilech. 1 second, you're still muted. Levi, are you still there? Just 1 second. Can Rabbi Gurevitch please be unmuted?
Hey, now?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, l'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, thank you to everyone, l'chaim. And the Pashut Nekuda is a very simple thing. That from Membeis, Bias Moshiach, we got, when you learn the Maimer Basil Agani from Yud Aleph, but the Rebbe brings the concept of Adera Shvi, that everything is more practical in Adera Shvi and all of that. And the Rebbe brings it weiter and weiter, and we have to, als Shluchim, the Rebbe's Kinder, you have to work and basically bring it to the point as the Rebbe's Zohar Nachas and the Rebbe's language in this is Zen Zech Dod Lamato, Im Hashem, Moshiach Zal Shem Kumen, and that's it. This is basically what we all need. And if you're talking about Beis and the Sichas over there, with the Uftubetron, whether it's a Sefer Torah, whether the Rebbe read about in Sefer Torah, which is Achdus Yisroel, Vogel, and in one of the Sichas is with the Bochum have to, when they go, this is actually from previous years, the Bochum have to go and, Meifid Zayin, Vogel, and Ufton, bringing some, in Yud Aleph, to bring some people to 770 from those shuls. Think about it. This was all then. And what's now? Now it's 4 years later after Membeis, but the Rebbe started, I feel that the Nusach Hashanah, the Shem Hashanah, is Bias Moshiach. And now we are 4 years later, and we need ploys in this. Yes, whatever is happening in the world. When we know the MS, Kamen should play from them. You can't run away from it. And the MS is by us, and the Rebbe speaks so much about that we get it from the Rebbe, that we know the Derech HaEmes, and Derech HaEmes is Poshet in the Flernen, Meifet Zayin Chassidus, and bringing Chassidus to everyone, and bring everyone closer to Yiddishkeit and closer to the Rebbe, v'chulu. The Rebbe had Avos Yisroel to everyone, okay? And this is a big deal on its own, just when you read some Ikras Kedesh, v'chulu, it's amazing. Anyway, just to make the point, to organize, you want me to finalize this whole thing, is, again, the Junge Chevre, the Bochum of our time, and we all have to do what the Rebbe wants, and know that, and often more and more. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim and Meilech, Shekayach. I'm sitting next to a set of Teres Menachem, and there are 4 chalakim for Teres Menachem, Tashim and Beis, which it's definitely be a gleiche Zach if the Talmidei Yeshivas and all Chassidim take upon themselves this year to go through this Meilech year, which is obviously this year's Kriyas as well, and all the Inyanim, which our Ba'im Shana accomplishes, should definitely be accomplished in everything we do. Rabbi Vogel will be Messiahing with you, unless Rabbi Greenberg is still on. I haven't seen him here, but Rabbi Vogel, please tell us some divrei seirus, and with that, we'll be Messiahing this Verbringen.
I'm not used to drushes, I don't know. But I'd like to sign with the words, and good to mention that this was, I think, the only time the Rebbe did this. Usually after Hakafas, the Rebbe would say Gut Yontif 3 times, and the night after Simchas Torah, Tashim and Beis, the Rebbe screamed 3 times, Daloi Golos, Daloi Golos, Daloi Golos. Everybody repeated. Then the Rebbe sung Hu Elokeinu. It was a chiddush from Yirat Tashim and Beis. So, Daloi Golos.
Amen. Shekayach, all the organizers, Mendel Banon, Mati Slonim, Mendel Azimov, and all the other members of the Vaad Hatmimim, of course, the head, Rabbi Tzvi Shaltain, for making today's panel possible. The Eibusher should help. We should all have a good year, and a gebenchte year, and everything should go about Sachar Rabba Muflaga, and everything from the Tafshem Membeis, Mem Gimel, Mem Down, all the years in the Siyas should be Nimshach in the Matam Asar Tzvachim. Achaim, Gad Yantif, and Yashakayach.
Amen.